They said she was dead. They were wrong. 3 years ago, Lena Carter walked away from everything, her career, her reputation, her very identity, to expose a truth that could have killed her. She vanished into the shadows, became a ghost cleaning the homes of the people she once prosecuted. But one night, one dance, one moment of weakness, and her carefully constructed anonymity shattered. The man who found her didn't want to destroy her. He wanted to use her. And what terrified Lana most? Part of her wanted to say yes. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The ballroom was empty. That was the only reason Lena Carter allowed herself to enter it. She stood in the doorway, mop bucket in one hand, the other gripping the frame as if the polished mahogany might anchor her to reality. The Belmont Estate's grand ballroom stretched before her like a cathedral of wealth. 40-foot ceilings, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire legal career, and windows that overlooked the kind of manicured gardens that required a full-time staff to maintain. 3 years ago, she would have walked into a room like this wearing Valentino in confidence. Now she wore a gray uniform with Spotless Solutions cleaning service embroidered on the pocket, and the only thing she carried was exhaustion. It was 11:47 p.m. The Belmonts were in Monaco. The estate manager had left at 9. The security guards rotated through the East Wing every 45 minutes, which gave her a reliable window of solitude. Lena pushed her cart into the ballroom, the wheels squeaking against the herringbone floors. She should clean quickly and leave. That was the protocol. That was safe. Instead, she walked to the center of the room and stopped. The silence was profound. Not peaceful. Profound. The kind of silence that made you aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat, your own terrible smallness in a space designed to make people feel significant. She pulled out her phone, her hands trembling slightly. She told herself it was fatigue. She'd been on her feet for 14 hours, cleaning 4 different properties. Her lower back ached. Her knees protested every movement. At 34, she felt ancient, but that wasn't why her hands shook. Lena scrolled through her playlist, past the true crime podcasts she used to pass time on bus rides, past the white noise tracks she used to fall asleep in the group home she shared with 2 other women who also understood what it meant to need to be invisible. She found what she was looking for buried in a folder she'd labeled Old Life, Don't Open. Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. Her finger hovered over the play button. This is stupid. This is dangerous. She pressed play. The music filled the ballroom and Lena closed her eyes. For a moment, she just stood there, letting the notes wash over her. Then her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Her right foot slid back into 4th position. Her arms lifted, softening at the elbows. Her spine lengthened as if pulled by an invisible string, and Lena Carter began to dance. She moved like water, like memory, like everything she'd been forced to leave behind. The legal briefs, the courtroom victories, the respective colleagues who'd later pretended not to know her name, all of it dissolved as she turned across the marble floor. Her body spoke a language her voice had forgotten. Grace, power, precision. She'd started ballet at 4. By 16, she'd been dancing with the San Francisco Youth Ballet. By 18, she'd realized her body would never be quite right for a professional company. Too tall, too muscular, too much. And she'd channeled that discipline into law school instead. But the dance had never left her. It had been there in the way she moved through a courtroom, commanding attention without demanding it. It had been there in her closing arguments, each word placed as deliberately as a pirouette. Now, alone in a billionaire's empty ballroom, it was just hers. Lena executed a series of fouettés, her arms creating shapes in the air, her legs slicing through space with mathematical precision. She felt the old power returning, the sense of occupying her body completely rather than just hauling it through another shift. She didn't notice when the music transitioned to the next piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. She just kept dancing, a développé that stretched her hamstring to its limit, an arabesque that made her remember what it felt like to be beautiful, a grand jeté that for one perfect moment made her feel like she could fly. The music swelled, and so did something dangerous in her chest. Not quite hope, she'd learned better than that, but something adjacent to it. A reminder that she was still alive, still capable of feeling something other than fear and fatigue. She was mid-pirouette when she saw him. A man stood in the doorway. The same doorway she'd entered through 15 minutes ago. He was perfectly still, one hand in the pocket of what looked like a $10,000 suit, the other holding a glass of whiskey. The dim light from the hallway backlit him, making it impossible to see his face clearly. But she could feel his attention like a physical weight. Lena froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. The music continued playing, obscenely loud now, announcing her violation of every rule she'd set for herself. The man took a step into the ballroom, and the chandelier light caught his features. He was maybe 40, with the kind of face that suggested both aristocracy and violence. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, and eyes so dark they appeared black even in the light. "Don't stop on my account," he said. His voice carried an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe, but softened by years of somewhere else. "It's the most interesting thing that's happened in this house in months." Lena grabbed her phone, killing the music. The silence that followed felt like a judgment. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. I'm almost finished with this room. I'll get out of your way." She moved toward her mop bucket, every instinct screaming at her to run. She'd been so careful. 3 years of being invisible, of keeping her head down, of never drawing attention, and she'd blown it for what? A dance? A moment of weakness? "You're very good," the man said, not moving from his position by the door. "Professionally trained, I would guess. Where did you study?" "I didn't," Lena lied, reaching for the mop. "I should really finish. San Francisco Youth Ballet, if I had to guess." "You have that particular quality they instill, technical precision, married to emotional restraint. Very American, very controlled." Lena's hand stilled on the mop handle. She forced herself to turn and face him fully. Up close, he was even more unsettling, not because he was threatening, but because he was watching her the way she used to watch witnesses on the stand. Like he could see the lie before she even told it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said evenly. "I clean houses, that's all." "Of course," he said, and took a sip of his whiskey. "My apologies. I must have you confused with someone else. Someone who used to be brilliant before she decided to vanish." The bottom dropped out of Lena's stomach. He knew. Somehow this man, this stranger in a mansion she wasn't supposed to be alone in, knew exactly who she was. Lena's fight or flight response kicked in, and she chose flight. She abandoned the mop bucket and moved toward the door, but he shifted his position slightly, not blocking her way exactly, but making it clear she'd have to acknowledge him to pass. "My name is Adrian Vieri," he said. "And before you run, you should know that I'm not here to hurt you. In fact, I'm here specifically because of you." "I don't know you," Lena said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing up her throat. "And you don't know me." "Lena Catherine Carter," Adrian said, and the sound of her full name, her real name, made her feel naked. "Born in Portland, Oregon, graduated summa cum laude from Berkeley, then top of your class at Stanford Law. Joined Morrison and Webb as the youngest associate they'd ever hired. Made junior partner in 4 years, which was a firm record." "Stop," Lena said. He didn't stop. "You specialized in financial litigation, made your reputation dismantling complex fraud schemes. You were so good at following the money that Fortune 500 companies paid premium rates just to have you on retainer." I said stop. "And then 3 years ago, you were lead counsel on the Meridian case. You discovered that your own firm was helping Meridian Technologies hide over $2 billion in fraudulent assets. You had a choice. Stay quiet and make partner, or expose the whole thing." Lena's jaw clenched. "I don't want to talk about this." "You chose to expose it," Adrian continued, his voice softening slightly. "You turned over evidence to the FBI, testified before a grand jury, and ensured that 12 executives went to prison, including 2 senior partners at your own firm." "They destroyed me for it," Lena said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "They made sure I'd never work in law again. She cut herself off, horrified that she'd said anything at all. Adrian nodded slowly. "They blacklisted you. Spread rumors that you'd fabricated evidence. Made sure every major firm in the country knew you were unreliable. You couldn't get hired as a paralegal, let alone an attorney." "How do you know all this?" Lena demanded. "Because I make it my business to know things," Adrian said simply. And because I've been looking for you for 6 months. That stopped her cold. Why? Adrian set his whiskey glass on a nearby table and took a step closer. Lena noticed for the first time that he moved with unusual economy, no wasted motion, every gesture purposeful. It reminded her of the way she used to dance. Because you're the best, he said, and I need the best. I'm a maid, Lena said flatly. I clean toilets and empty trash cans. Whatever you think I am, whatever I used to be, that person doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't she? Adrian tilted his head slightly, studying her. Because 5 minutes ago, I watched that person dance like she owned the world. I saw her eyes. I saw her remember exactly how powerful she used to be. Lena felt something crack inside her chest. She forced it back down. I danced to stay sane, she said. That's all. It doesn't mean anything. It means you're still in there, Adrian said. The woman who was brilliant enough to unravel a $2 billion fraud scheme. The woman who had the courage to sacrifice everything for what was right. That woman is standing in front of me right now, wearing a cleaning service uniform and pretending to be invisible. Maybe I like being invisible, Lena shot back. Maybe I'm tired of people like you thinking they know who I am and what I want. Fair enough, Adrian said. So let me tell you what I want and you can decide for yourself. I'm not interested. I run a private consulting firm, Adrian continued as if she hadn't spoken. We work with clients who have been failed by the traditional legal system. People who have legitimate grievances but no recourse. People who need someone willing to operate in the spaces between the law. Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to break the law for you. I want you to bend it, Adrian corrected. To find the loopholes, the gray areas, the ways to deliver justice when the system can't or won't. You're already familiar with how the law fails people. You lived it. And you think I'm desperate enough to work for some kind of, what, vigilante consulting firm? I think you're wasted cleaning houses, Adrian said bluntly. I think you go home to whatever small room you rent and you lie awake wondering if this is all there is now. I think you see injustice every day and you tell yourself it's not your problem anymore because getting involved cost you everything last time. He was right. He was absolutely right, and Lena hated him for it. I'm not interested, she repeated, but her voice wavered. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was simple. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, just a name and a phone number. One case, he said, holding it out to her. Work with me on one case. If you hate it, walk away. I'll make sure you're compensated for your time and I'll never contact you again. And if I say no right now, then I'll respect that, Adrian said. I'll leave, and you can go back to being invisible. You can spend the rest of your life pretending that woman I watched dance doesn't exist. Lena stared at the card but didn't take it. Why me? She asked. Really? There are thousands of lawyers who would work for you. Why track down someone who's been out of the game for 3 years? Adrian smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face completely. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd finally found worthy prey. Because everyone else plays by the rules until they can't, he said. You already learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes the rules are part of the problem. That makes you dangerous. That makes you valuable. He set the card on the table next to his whiskey glass. The case is a simple one, he continued. A woman whose son died in a car accident. The insurance company is refusing to pay out on a life insurance policy because of a technicality, a medication he failed to disclose that had nothing to do with the accident. She's a single mother, works 2 jobs, and she needs that money to avoid losing her house. That's not a case, Lena said. That's a tragedy. But it's not. The insurance company is called Fortress Financial, Adrian interrupted. Ring any bells? It did. Fortress Financial had been one of Morrison & Webb's biggest clients. Lena had worked on several of their cases, defending them against claims that their coverage denials were systematic rather than legitimate. She'd been good at it. She'd won. She'd also suspected even then that the company was engaged in exactly the kind of predatory behavior they were being accused of. You want me to go after my old client, Lena said slowly. I want you to correct a mistake, Adrian said. The insurance company's lawyers are using every trick in the book to avoid paying out. The woman's attorney is competent but outgunned. She's going to lose unless someone who knows how Fortress operates gets involved. And what exactly would I be doing? I'm not licensed to practice law anymore. You'd be consulting, Adrian said smoothly, providing research and strategic advice. Technically legal, if not traditionally ethical. But Lena picked up the business card, turning it over in her fingers. The cardstock was expensive, the kind that whispered money and power and all the things she used to take for granted. What's the catch? She asked. No catch? You work the case. If we win, the woman gets her insurance payout. If we lose, at least you tried. And you? What do you get out of this? Adrian's smile widened slightly. I get to watch you work. I get to see if you're as good as I think you are. And if you decide to stay, I get the best financial investigator in the country on my team. I'm not. You are, Adrian said firmly. You're just afraid to admit it, because last time you were brilliant, it destroyed your life. But that was their failure, Lena, not yours. They punished you for being better than they were, for having more integrity than they could afford. Lena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 years pressing down on her. 3 years of scrubbing floors and changing sheets and making herself small. 3 years of pretending she didn't see the injustices that happened every day, all around her, to people who had no voice and no champion. 3 years of being invisible. She opened her eyes and met Adrian's gaze. One case, she said. That's all? And I don't work for you. I consult. One time. Then we're done. Agreed, Adrian said, but something in his expression suggested he didn't believe the one-time part any more than she did. Lena pocketed the business card. When do I start? Tomorrow, Adrian said. I'll have my assistant send you the details and the case file. Come to my office at 10 a.m. I have work tomorrow. Call in sick. I can't just... Lena, Adrian said, and the way he said her name made her stop. The woman's name is Maria Ruiz. Her son was 23 years old. He worked at a grocery store and went to community college at night. He was going to be a teacher. And because of a medication he took for asthma when he was 16, a medication that was fully disclosed on his application, by the way, but that Fortress is claiming wasn't, his mother is going to lose everything. Lena felt something ignite in her chest. Anger. Clean, pure, righteous anger. 10 a.m., she said. Adrian nodded. I'll see you tomorrow. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, he said, you were magnificent when you danced. Don't let them make you forget that. Then he was gone, and Lena was alone in the ballroom again. She stood there for a long moment, the business card heavy in her pocket, her heart racing with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Finally, she went back to her mop bucket. She finished cleaning the ballroom with mechanical precision, putting everything back in order, erasing any evidence that she'd been there. But something had changed. She could feel it in the way her hands moved, in the straightness of her spine, in the quiet determination settling into her bones. Tomorrow, she would walk into Adrian Vieri's office. Tomorrow, she would look at a case file and remember what it felt like to fight. Tomorrow, she would stop being invisible. For tonight, though, she allowed herself one small luxury. As she wheeled her cart toward the service exit, she pulled out her phone and played the Chopin Nocturne one more time. And in the empty hallway of a billionaire's mansion, Lena Carter smiled. Lena didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed in the room she rented in a converted house in Richmond. 800 square feet she shared with a bathroom down the hall and the constant smell of whatever Mrs. Chen was cooking in the unit next door. The business card sat on her nightstand, innocent and dangerous. At 3 a.m., she finally opened her laptop. It took her 20 minutes to crack her way back into the legal databases she'd once accessed daily. Her old passwords didn't work, obviously, but she still remembered enough backdoors from her Morrison and Webb days to get in through a side entrance. Technically illegal, but then again, she wasn't technically a lawyer anymore. Fortress Financial's recent litigation history scrolled across her screen. The pattern was obvious once you knew to look for it. Systematic denial of legitimate claims based on paperwork technicalities. They'd paid out millions in settlements over the past 5 years, but never enough to change their behavior. It was cheaper to pay off the occasional lawsuit than to actually honor their policies. Lena's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling threads, following connections. She found Maria Ruiz's claim in the public records, denied 4 months ago. Appeal denied 6 weeks ago. Attorney filed a lawsuit 2 weeks ago, but it would be tied up in court for at least a year, probably longer. Maria Ruiz would lose her house long before then. At 5 a.m., Lena gave up on sleep entirely. She made instant coffee in the microwave and pulled out the 3 boxes of files she'd kept from her old life. She'd told herself she kept them as insurance, in case anyone ever tried to claim she'd been the corrupt one. But really, she'd kept them because throwing them away would have been admitting it was really over. She found what she was looking for in the second box. Her notes from a Fortress financial case she'd worked 3 years ago. A similar denial, similar technicality. She'd won that case for Fortress, and she remembered feeling sick about it afterward. But she'd also documented everything, every strategy, every loophole, every dirty trick Fortress's in-house counsel liked to use. Lena pulled out a yellow legal pad. She'd bought a pack of them 2 years ago in a moment of weakness, thinking maybe she'd need them someday, and started writing. By 8 a.m., she had 15 pages of notes. By 9, she'd showered, dressed in the one professional outfit she still owned, navy suit, slightly outdated but still serviceable, and caught the bus toward downtown San Francisco. Adrian's office was in a building she'd walked past 100 times during her old life but never entered. It was elegant without being ostentatious, the kind of place that housed wealth managers and private equity firms and people who made money in ways most people didn't understand. The elevator opened on the 14th floor into a reception area that was all clean lines and understated luxury. A woman in her 50s with perfect posture and knowing eyes looked up from her desk. "Lena Carter?" she asked. "Yes?" "Mr. Vieri is expecting you. Conference room 2, down the hall, second door on your left." Lena followed the directions and found Adrian standing at a window, looking out over the city. He'd traded last night's suit for something more casual, dark pants, white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, but he still carried himself like a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. "You came," he said without turning around. "I said I would." People say many things. He turned to face her, and his eyes moved over her professional outfit with something that might have been approval. "You look like a lawyer again." "I look like someone who owns one suit," Lena corrected. Adrian smiled. "Sit. Tell me what you found." "How do you know I found anything?" "Because you have that look, the one you probably get when you've been up all night pulling threads and building a case in your mind." He wasn't wrong. Lena sat down and pulled out her legal pad. "Fortress Financial has a pattern," she began. "They deny claims based on application technicalities, then drag out the litigation until the claimant either settles for pennies or gives up entirely. They've been doing it for at least 7 years, probably longer." "Old news," Adrian said, sitting across from her. "Their pattern is exactly why I took this case. The question is, how do we break it?" Lena flipped through her notes. Maria Ruiz's son disclosed his asthma medication on his application. I pulled the original documents. It's right there, line 14. Albuterol is needed for asthma. Fortress is claiming he failed to disclose it, but that's a lie. Their lawyer is arguing the disclosure was incomplete because he didn't list the prescribing physician's name. "That's bullshit," Lena said flatly. "The application doesn't require that level of detail. They're making up requirements retroactively." "Agreed. But their lawyer is very good at making bullshit sound reasonable in court. How do we counter it?" Lena leaned forward. "We don't fight them in court. Not yet. We hit them where they're actually vulnerable." "Which is?" "Public relations," Lena said. "Fortress Financial just launched a major marketing campaign about being family first. They're sponsoring youth sports leagues, running ads about how they protect families in their darkest hours. All very touching. And very expensive to maintain," Adrian said, his eyes lighting up. "You want to threaten their brand. I want to show them what it costs to be exposed. Maria Ruiz isn't just a claim number. She's a grieving mother who's about to be homeless because a billion-dollar company won't honor a policy her son paid into for 5 years. That's a story. That's a headline. You want to go to the press?" "I want to prepare to go to the press," Lena corrected. "We document everything. We get Maria's story ready. We line up a reporter from a major outlet who'd love to sink their teeth into corporate malfeasance. And then we let Fortress know that they have 72 hours to settle before we go public." Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "That's extortion." "That's negotiation," Lena said. "Everything we'd be doing is factual. If they choose to settle to avoid bad publicity, that's their decision." It's also exactly the kind of gray area maneuvering I was hoping you'd be willing to do. Lena met his gaze steadily. You want someone to bend the rules? Fine. But I only bend them in one direction, toward justice. The moment you ask me to do something that hurts someone who doesn't deserve it, I'm out. Noted, Adrian said. So what do you need from me? Access to Maria Ruiz. I want to interview her myself, get her story in her own words. And I need you to make some calls, find out which reporters have covered Fortress before, who's looking for a story like this. Done. Anything else? Lena hesitated. I need to know something first. Why do you do this? You're clearly wealthy. You could be doing anything. Why run a firm that operates in legal gray areas to help people who probably can't pay you much? Adrian was quiet for a moment. My mother was an immigrant, he finally said. She came to the U.S. with nothing, worked 3 jobs, saved every penny to send me to good schools. When I was 15, she got sick. The hospital bills bankrupted her. Her insurance company denied her claim on a technicality, said her condition was pre-existing, even though it wasn't. What happened? She died, Adrian said simply. 6 months later. And the insurance company that denied her claim? They paid their executives bonuses that year. Multi-million-dollar bonuses. Lena felt something shift in her understanding of the man across from her. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be sorry, Adrian said. Be effective. That's all that matters, whether we can actually help people or whether we're just making ourselves feel better. I can help Maria, Lena said with certainty. Give me 2 days. You have them. Maria Ruiz lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Daly City that smelled like vanilla and grief. She was 48, but looked older, with lines around her eyes that spoke of too many double shifts and not enough sleep. She opened the door already apologizing. I'm sorry, the place is a mess. I've been working so much I haven't had time to… Mrs. Ruiz, Lena said gently, I'm not here to judge your housekeeping. I'm here to help you get justice for Carlos. Maria's eyes filled with tears at her son's name. She ushered Lena inside, offering coffee that Lena accepted even though the apartment was already too warm. They sat at a small kitchen table covered with bills and legal documents. Maria's hand shook as she poured coffee into mismatched mugs. Mr. Vieri said you were a lawyer, Maria said, that you might be able to help when my lawyer couldn't. I used to be a lawyer, Lena corrected gently. Now I'm something else, but I'm going to help you. I need you to tell me about Carlos. Not about the insurance claim, about him, who he was. Maria's face transformed. For the next hour, Lena listened as a mother talked about her son. Carlos, who'd worked at Safeway but wanted to be a teacher. Carlos, who'd tutored kids in the neighborhood for free. Carlos, who'd had asthma since he was little but never let it slow him down. Carlos, who'd been driving home from his night class when a drunk driver ran a red light and killed him instantly. He had life insurance because he was responsible, Maria said, her voice breaking. He wanted to make sure I'd be okay if anything happened to him, and now they're saying he lied on his application? He didn't lie. He told them about the asthma. It's right there in the paperwork. Lena pulled out the application documents she'd brought. Show me. Maria's finger, weathered from years of cleaning houses and washing dishes, pointed to line 14. Right there. Albuterol as needed for asthma. He wrote it himself. And Fortress is claiming this disclosure was incomplete? They're saying he should have listed his doctor's name, but that's not what the form asked for. I read it myself before he submitted it. We were so careful. Lena felt rage building in her chest. The clean, focused rage that had once made her a formidable litigator. Mrs. Ruiz, she said carefully, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you willing to fight? Because what I'm going to do might get ugly. The insurance company might try to discredit Carlos, might dig into his life looking for anything they can use. They might make this painful. Maria lifted her chin. My son was a good person. He worked hard. He helped people. He deserved better than being killed by a drunk driver and then called a liar by some company that just wants to keep his money. So yes, I'm willing to fight. Good, Lena said, because we're going to make them pay. 2 days later, Lena sat in Adrian's conference room with a complete battle plan. She'd spent 48 hours doing what she did best, following the money, finding the connections, building an airtight case. Fortress Financial has settled over 300 similar claims in the past 5 years, she told Adrian, spreading documents across the table. But they've never admitted wrongdoing. Every settlement includes an NDA. They're buying silence, not fixing the problem. But can we contact any of those people? Legally? No. The NDAs are ironclad, but I don't need to contact them. I just need to document the pattern for a reporter who can make the case that Fortress is systematically denying legitimate claims. You found a reporter? I found 3, Lena said, all of them interested. I picked Sarah Chen from the Chronicle. She's hungry, she's good, and she's got a personal reason to care. Her father died last year, and his insurance company dragged out the claim for months, and Adrian nodded slowly. And our leverage? This, Lena pulled out a folder. Fortress's internal emails. I have a friend who still works at Morrison & Webb, someone who also got screwed when they imploded. She sent me these anonymously. They show Fortress executives explicitly discussing denying claims based on technicalities they knew were legally questionable. That's potentially inadmissible in court, yes, but devastating in the court of public opinion, and probably enough to trigger an investigation by the state insurance commissioner. Adrian picked up the emails, reading through them with growing satisfaction. You're a dangerous woman, Lena Carter. You're just now figuring that out? He laughed, a real laugh, not the controlled smile she'd seen before. How do you want to play this? We set up a meeting with Fortress's legal team. We lay out what we have, the pattern, the emails, the grieving mother who's about to lose her house. We give them 48 hours to settle. If they refuse, we go public. They might call our bluff. It's not a bluff, Lena said firmly. I'm fully prepared to hand everything to Sarah Chen and let her run with it. The question is whether Fortress wants to write a check to Maria Ruiz or watch their stock price drop when the headline reads, "Billion-dollar insurer denies claim to grieving mother." When's the meeting? Tomorrow, 10 a.m., their office. Adrian stood and extended his hand across the table. Welcome back, counselor. Lena shook his hand, feeling electricity run through her palm. I'm not a counselor anymore. No? Adrian agreed. You're something better. You're someone who's willing to fight dirty for the right reasons. As Lena left his office that evening, the city lights spreading below her like a field of possibility, she realized something had fundamentally shifted. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was hunting. And tomorrow, Fortress Financial was going to learn what it felt like to be the prey. The Fortress Financial building rose 40 stories above Market Street, all glass and steel, and the kind of architectural arrogance that announced its occupants had nothing to fear. Lena stood on the sidewalk outside, watching office workers flow through the revolving doors like blood cells through an artery, each one convinced they were doing important work. She knew better. She'd been one of them once. Adrian appeared beside her, carrying 2 coffee cups. He handed her one without asking if she wanted it. You ready? Lena took the coffee, grateful for something to do with her hands. I've been ready since yesterday. That's not what I asked. She turned to look at him. He was watching her with that unsettling intensity she was beginning to recognize as his default setting. Not judgment, assessment, like he was constantly calculating what she was capable of. I'm fine, she said. You're about to walk into a room full of lawyers who will recognize you instantly, Adrian said quietly. Lawyers who probably participated in blacklisting you. Lawyers who made sure you'd never work in this profession again. And you're telling me you're fine? Lena felt something sharp twist in her chest, but she kept her voice level. What do you want me to say? That I'm terrified? That every instinct I have is screaming at me to run? Yes, Adrian, I'm all of those things. But Maria Ruiz is going to lose her house in 6 weeks unless we fix this. So I'm going to walk into that building, sit across from people who destroyed my career and make them pay her what they owe. Is that ready enough for you? Adrian smiled. Not the predatory smile from the ballroom, but something warmer. That's exactly ready enough. They entered the building together. The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt like ascending into enemy territory. Lena watched the numbers climb and tried to control her breathing. She'd spent the previous night rehearsing this meeting in her mind, anticipating every possible response, preparing for every attack. But preparation only went so far. At some point, you had to step into the arena and fight. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd been told to make expensive into a physical space. Marble floors, leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than Maria Ruiz would earn in a decade. Mr. Vieri and guest for Daniel Kraus, Adrian told the receptionist. The woman's smile was professional and empty. Conference room A. Someone will escort you. They waited exactly 90 seconds, long enough to establish that Fortress was in control, not quite long enough to be insulting, before a young associate appeared to guide them down a hallway lined with photos of Fortress executives shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Conference room A was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. The table could seat 20, and at the far end sat 3 people who looked like they'd been cast for a legal thriller. Daniel Kraus, senior counsel for Fortress Financial, 60-ish with silver hair and a face that suggested he'd never lost a case he cared about. Jennifer Park, mid-40s, Fortress's head of litigation, wearing a suit that cost more than Lena's monthly rent. And Marcus Webb, early 30s, probably the associate tasked with doing the actual work, while the senior lawyers took credit. Daniel stood as they entered, his smile fixed and meaningless. "Adrian, good to see you. And you've brought—" His gaze landed on Lena, and she watched recognition flicker across his face. "Ms. Carter, I have to say, I'm surprised to see you here." "I'm consulting on this matter," Lena said evenly, taking a seat across from them without waiting to be invited. "Consulting," Jennifer repeated, her tone making the word sound vaguely obscene. "How interesting. I wasn't aware you were still involved in legal work." "I'm involved in justice," Lena said. "Sometimes those things overlap." Daniel's smile tightened. "Well, shall we get started? I have to say, Adrian, I was intrigued by your request for this meeting. The Ruiz case is fairly straightforward. Our position is clear, and we're prepared to defend it in court if necessary. Your position," Adrian said pleasantly, "is that a 23-year-old who fully disclosed his asthma medication somehow failed to disclose his asthma medication because he didn't include information the application never requested. Does that sum it up?" "The application requires complete medical disclosure," Jennifer said. "Mr. Ruiz's disclosure was incomplete. That voids the policy." Lena opened her folder and slid a document across the table. "This is the application Carlos Ruiz submitted. Line 14, clear as day. Albuterol as needed for asthma. Tell me which part of that is incomplete." Marcus picked up the document, scanned it, and looked uncomfortable. Jennifer didn't even glance at it. "The disclosure lacks sufficient detail," Jennifer said. "Specifically, the prescribing physician's name and the date the medication was first prescribed. Without that information, we can't verify the accuracy of the claim." "The application doesn't ask for that information," Lena said. "The application asks for complete disclosure," which he provided. Everything the form requested, he disclosed. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Carter, I appreciate your passion for this case, but you're not a licensed attorney anymore. Perhaps you're not familiar with current interpretations of insurance disclosure requirements." The condescension was deliberate, designed to throw her off balance. Lena smiled. "You're right, Mr. Kraus. I'm not a licensed attorney, which means I don't have to worry about professional courtesy or bar ethics when I call your argument complete bullshit." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "Careful. Why? What are you going to do? Report me to the Bar Association? I think we both know that ship has sailed." Lena pulled out another document. "This is a summary of Fortress Financial's claim denial patterns over the past 5 years. 347 cases where you denied claims based on application technicalities. 212 of those eventually settled, always with ND as attached. You're not defending legitimate policy requirements. You're running a systematic scheme to avoid paying claims you know are valid." "That's a serious accusation," Daniel said, but something in his voice had shifted. He wasn't dismissive anymore. He was calculating. "It's a factual statement," Lena corrected. "And here's another fact. I have internal Fortress emails discussing this exact strategy. Executives explicitly talking about using technical denials to reduce payout percentages. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Those emails would be privileged," Jennifer said carefully. "They would be," Lena agreed, "if I were planning to use them in court. But I'm not. I'm planning to give them to Sarah Chen at the Chronicle. along with Maria Ruiz's story. Let's see. How do you think the headline reads? Mother loses home after insurer denies dead son's claim. Or maybe Fortress Financial's hidden strategy, deny first, settle later. That's extortion, Marcus said, finally speaking up. Adrian laughed. It's journalism. Ms. Carter has documented evidence of potentially illegal business practices. She has every right to share that information with the press. We'll sue, Jennifer said flatly. For what? Lena asked. Truth isn't defamatory. And even if you wanted to tie this up in court, think about the optics. Billion-dollar insurance company sues whistleblower and grieving mother? That's not a lawsuit, that's a PR nightmare. Daniel held up a hand, silencing Jennifer before she could respond. He studied Lena with what looked like grudging respect. What do you want? He asked. I want you to honor Carlos Ruiz's life insurance policy, Lena said. Full payout, no strings attached. And I want it processed within 72 hours. That's not possible, Jennifer said. Even if we agreed, which we're not, processing takes weeks. You can cut a check from your settlement fund, Adrian said. I know you have one. Companies like Fortress always do. Money set aside for exactly these situations. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Lena could see him working through the calculus. Pay out one claim versus potential investigation by the insurance commissioner. Potential stock price impact. Potential class action lawsuit if the pattern became public. We'd need assurances, he finally said, that this information doesn't go public, that Miss Ruiz signs a settlement agreement with confidentiality provisions. No, Lena said immediately. No? Jennifer looked genuinely surprised. Maria Ruiz doesn't sign an NDA. She gets her money, period. What you do with your business practices after that is your problem. If you want to change the way you handle claims, great. If not, someone else will eventually expose you. But Maria doesn't buy your silence. She just gets what her son paid for. That's not standard, Daniel said. Nothing about this is standard, Adrian replied. Here's what is standard. You have 48 hours to decide. Pay the claim, no NDA, or we go public with everything. Your choice. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. Jennifer looked furious, but Daniel just nodded slowly. We'll need to discuss this internally, he said. Of course, Adrian said, standing. You have our number. Lena gathered her documents, forcing her hands to remain steady even though adrenaline was screaming through her system. She'd done it. She'd walked into that room and fought, and they'd blinked first. As they reached the door, Daniel's voice stopped them. Ms. Carter? She turned. It's a shame what happened to you, he said. You were an exceptional attorney. I still am, Lena said. I just choose different clients now. Outside in the elevator, Lena waited until the doors closed before letting herself react. She leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly shaky. You were brilliant, Adrian said quietly. I was terrified. You were brilliantly terrified, he smiled. They're going to pay. You know that, right? They can't afford not to. They could call our bluff. It's not a bluff. You'd really give everything to Sarah Chen? Lena met his eyes. Every single document. I told you. I only fight in one direction. Good, Adrian said, because I have another case for you. We agreed to one case. We agreed you'd consult on one case. You did, brilliantly. Now I'm asking if you want to do it again. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Lena stepped out into the sunlight streaming through the glass walls, feeling something shift inside her chest. It wasn't quite hope. She still didn't trust hope, but it was close. Tell me about the case, she said. 27 hours later, Lena's phone rang at 6 in the morning. She grabbed it, still half asleep, and saw Adrian's name on the screen. They folded, he said without preamble. Full payout. Wire transfer to Maria Ruiz's account. No NDA. It'll hit her bank by noon. Lena sat up, suddenly wide awake. They're really paying? Every penny. Plus they're voluntarily reviewing their claim denial procedures. I suspect the insurance commissioner made some calls after we might have accidentally sent them a courtesy copy of certain documents. You didn't. I absolutely did. Anonymously, of course. Lena found herself smiling. We won. You won, Adrian corrected. I just provided the venue. When do we tell Maria? I thought you might want to do that yourself, in person. 2 hours later, Lena stood on Maria Ruiz's doorstep, holding a folder that contained the wire transfer confirmation and a letter from Fortress Financial confirming that Carlos's life insurance claim had been paid in full. Maria opened the door in her work uniform, clearly about to leave for an early shift. Her face fell when she saw Lena. "Oh no," she said. "They said no, didn't they? They're going to fight us in court and I can't afford—" "They paid," Lena interrupted gently. "Maria, they paid everything, the full policy amount. It's already in your bank account." Maria stared at her, not comprehending. "What?" "Carlos's life insurance. They paid it, all of it. You're not going to lose your house." Maria's knees buckled. Lena caught her, helped her to the couch, and watched as the woman who'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will finally broke down, sobbing. "He was such a good boy," Maria said through her tears. "He deserved better than what happened to him. He deserved to have his mother taken care of," Lena said quietly. "And now she will be. That was what he wanted, Maria. That's why he bought the policy." Maria grabbed Lena's hand, squeezing them so tightly it hurt. Thank you. I don't know how to, I can't even—" "You don't need to thank me," Lena said. "I just made them do what they should have done from the beginning." But Maria was shaking her head. "No, you fought for me. For Carlos. When no one else would. That means everything." After Lena left Maria's apartment, she stood on the sidewalk and let herself feel it. The satisfaction, the rightness, the bone-deep knowledge that she'd done something that mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. "Meeting at my office, 2 p.m., new case, bring your fight." Lena looked at the message for a long moment. She could ignore it. She could go back to her cleaning jobs, to her small room, to her invisible life. The Maria Ruiz case was finished. She'd proven she could still do this work, still make a difference. She could walk away with that victory intact, or she could go to that meeting. She thought about Maria's face when she'd learned she wasn't going to lose her house. She thought about Carlos, who'd done everything right and still been cheated by a system designed to protect the powerful. She thought about all the other people out there right now, facing injustices they had no power to fight. And she thought about herself dancing in that ballroom 3 days ago, remembering what it felt like to be alive. Lena texted back, "I'll be there." The second case was worse than the first. Lena sat in Adrian's conference room that afternoon, reading through a file that made her blood boil. The client was a man named Thomas Chen, 56, who'd worked for a tech company called Novus Systems for 23 years. 6 months ago, he'd reported safety violations in the company's manufacturing facility, violations that put workers at serious risk. 2 weeks after he filed the report, he was terminated for performance issues. "Let me guess," Lena said, looking up from the file. "His performance reviews were stellar until the moment he became a problem. 23 years of exceeds expectations," Adrian confirmed. "Then suddenly he's underperforming and needs to be let go." Retaliation. Obviously, but proving it is another matter. Novus has expensive lawyers who are very good at making whistleblower cases disappear. Lena flipped through the performance reviews, the safety reports, the termination paperwork. The pattern was obvious, but patterns weren't proof, at least not the kind that held up in court. "What does he want?" she asked. "His job back, an admission that the termination was wrongful, and for the safety violations to be addressed before someone gets killed. That's a lot. That's why I need you." Lena closed the file. "I'm not sure what I can do here that his lawyer can't." "His lawyer is playing by the rules," Adrian said, filing motions, building a case, preparing for a trial that won't happen for 2 years. Meanwhile, Thomas can't find work because Novus has quietly blacklisted him in the industry. His savings are running out, his marriage is falling apart, and the safety violations still not fixed. "So you want me to find leverage? I want you to find the truth. The leverage will follow." That night, Lena returned to her room and spread the Novus Systems file across her bed. She'd learned something important from the Fortress case. Companies that broke the rules once usually broke them repeatedly. The trick was finding the pattern. She started with the safety violations Thomas had reported. They involved improper disposal of chemical waste from the manufacturing process, waste that was being dumped in ways that violated EPA regulations. Thomas had documentation, photos, even samples he'd collected before being fired. But there was something missing. The violations Thomas reported were serious, but they weren't catastrophic. They warranted fines, maybe a temporary shutdown for remediation. They didn't warrant destroying a 23-year employee's life to keep him quiet, which meant there was something else, something worse. Lena opened her laptop and started digging. 3 days later, she walked into Adrian's office with dark circles under her eyes and a theory that made her sick to her stomach. "The chemical waste isn't the real problem," she said, dropping a stack of documents on his desk. "It's what the waste contains." Adrian looked up from his own work. "I'm listening." Novus manufactures components for medical devices, specifically implantable devices, pacemakers, insulin pumps, things that go inside people's bodies. The waste Thomas saw being improperly disposed of? It came from a batch of components that failed quality control testing. Failed how? Microscopic defects that could cause device malfunction, potentially fatal malfunction. Lena pulled out a technical report. According to Novus's own quality standards, those components should have been destroyed and the entire production run scrapped. Instead, they were approved for use. Adrian's expression darkened. "How many devices?" "Best estimate? Around 1,500, distributed across 30 hospitals in 6 states, already implanted in patients." "That's criminal," Lena finished. "It's fraud, it's reckless endangerment. It's a potential mass casualty event waiting to happen, and Thomas stumbled onto it when he was documenting the waste disposal violations." "Can you prove this?" Lena hesitated. "Not in court. Not yet. The documentation I have is circumstantial. I can show that defective components were produced. I can show that waste from those components was improperly disposed of. But I can't definitively prove the defective components were approved for use rather than destroyed. That information would be in Novus's internal quality control database, which I obviously can't access." "Obviously," Adrian said, but his tone suggested he was thinking about ways to access it anyway. "There's more," Lena continued. "I found 3 adverse event reports filed with the FDA over the past 4 months. Patients with Novus devices experiencing unexplained malfunctions. The FDA hasn't connected them yet. They're treating them as isolated incidents, but the timing matches. These could be the defective devices." Adrian stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "If you're right, people are walking around right now with faulty medical devices inside them, devices that could fail at any moment." "Yes." "And Novus knows." "I think so. I think that's why they fired Thomas. Not because of the waste disposal, because he got too close to the real problem. What do you need?" Lena had been thinking about this question for 3 days. "I need access to someone inside Novus. Someone in quality control or manufacturing. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried." Whistleblowers are hard to find, especially at a company that just destroyed someone's life for speaking up. "I know, but if we can't prove this, Thomas loses his case and people die. Those are the options." Adrian turned back to face her. "There might be another way. A former Novus quality control manager reached out to me 6 months ago. She was looking for legal representation for her own wrongful termination case. I couldn't take it at the time, conflict with another client, but I kept her information." "Why was she terminated?" "She claimed she was pushed out after raising concerns about manufacturing standards. Sound familiar?" "Can you contact her?" "I'll make a call." 2 days later, Lena sat across from Rebecca Torres in a coffee shop in Palo Alto. Rebecca was 42, nervous, and clearly terrified of being seen talking to them. "I signed an NDA when I left Novus," she said immediately. "I can't give you confidential information." "We're not asking you to violate your NDA," Lena said gently. "We just want to understand what happened to you." Rebecca's hand shook as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "I worked in quality control for 8 years. It was a good job. I believed in the work. We were making devices that saved lives. But about a year ago, things started changing. We were getting pressure to approve components that didn't meet standards. Small things at first. Minor cosmetic issues that wouldn't affect performance. But it escalated," Lena guessed. Rebecca nodded. 6 months ago, we had a production run with microscopic stress fractures in the casing. Not huge, but enough that they could potentially cause device failure over time. I flagged them, recommended we scrap the entire batch. My supervisor overruled me. Why? Money, time. The company had committed to delivery deadlines they couldn't meet if we scrapped that batch, so instead they were approved for distribution. Lena's stomach clenched. How many units? 1,563. The exact number Lena had estimated. What happened when you pushed back? Adrian asked. I was told to be a team player, to trust that my supervisor knew better. When I went over his head to the VP of operations, I was put on a performance improvement plan. 2 months later, I was terminated for failing to meet performance standards. Rebecca's voice broke. I lost my job for trying to do the right thing, just like Thomas. Lena leaned forward. Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Do you know where documentation of that decision would be? The decision to approve those defective components? It would be in the QC database, electronic records of all inspection results and approval decisions. Would someone in the company still have access? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I might still have access. They never revoked my credentials. I think they assumed I'd be too afraid to use them. We would never ask you to do anything illegal, Adrian said carefully. But if you hypothetically wanted to check if your access still worked, Lena added, and if you happened to see documentation that proved Novus knowingly approved defective medical devices for implantation in patients, that would be information you'd be morally obligated to report, regardless of any NDA. Rebecca looked between them, understanding dawning in her eyes. I could go to jail. You could save lives, Lena said. Those 1,500 devices are inside people right now. If they fail, when they fail, people will die. And Novus will claim it was an unforeseeable manufacturing defect. They'll pay settlements, issue recalls, and nobody will ever know they knowingly put defective devices in people's bodies. Unless someone proves they knew, Adrian said. Rebecca's hands were shaking so hard she had to set down her coffee cup. I have kids. I have a mortgage. I can't afford to lose everything again. I know, Lena said softly, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you this won't be dangerous. It will be. But Rebecca, you already lost your job for trying to do the right thing. The question is whether that sacrifice meant anything. Thomas lost his job too, Rebecca said. Yes. And right now he's losing his house and his marriage while Novus's lawyers drag out his case. But if we can prove what they did, if we can show the pattern of retaliation against employees who tried to stop them from hurting people, we can make this mean something. Rebecca closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet with tears, but her voice was steady. Tell me what you need. 3 days later, Adrian's encrypted email received a file from an anonymous sender. The file contained quality control records from Novus Systems showing that batch NT447, 1,563 units, had been flagged for stress fractures and recommended for destruction by Rebecca Torres. It showed her supervisor overruling that recommendation. It showed the VP of operations signing off on the decision. And it showed those components being approved for distribution with full knowledge they didn't meet safety standards. Lena sat in Adrian's office, reading through the documents with growing fury. This is it, she said. This is everything we need. To do what? Adrian asked. To burn them down. We need to be smart about this. If we go to the FDA now, Novus will tie it up in bureaucracy for months. If we go to the press without FDA confirmation, they'll claim we're making false accusations. Lena thought about Maria Ruiz, about the way Fortress Financial had folded when faced with public exposure. But this was different. This wasn't about money. This was about bodies. We go to the patients, she said suddenly. What? The 3 people who filed adverse event reports with the FDA. We find them. We tell them what we know. We help them understand that their device failures weren't random. They were the result of corporate negligence. And then we help them file a lawsuit. That's the fastest way to force a recall, Lena finished. Once the lawsuit is filed, it becomes public record. The FDA will have to investigate. The press will cover it. And Novus won't be able to hide behind NDAs and legal delays. Adrian smiled slowly. You're learning. I'm remembering, Lena corrected. I used to be good at this. You're better than good. You're dangerous. That night, Lena lay awake in her small room staring at the ceiling. In 2 weeks, she'd taken down an insurance company and exposed a medical device manufacturer that was literally putting lives at risk. She'd helped people who had nowhere else to turn. She'd made a difference, and she'd never felt more alive. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Adrian. Third case came in today. Worse than the first two. You in? Lena looked at the message for a long time. She thought about the cleaning jobs she'd stopped showing up to, the small, safe life she'd built, the woman she'd been trying to become, invisible, careful, protected. Then she thought about Maria Ruiz's tears of relief, about Thomas Chen getting his life back, about Rebecca Torres finding the courage to fight. She typed back, "Send me the file." Because Lena Carter wasn't invisible anymore. She was exactly who she'd always been, and she was just getting started. The third case arrived in a manila envelope that felt too thin to contain something that would change everything. Lena opened it at Adrian's desk while he watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. Inside was a single photograph and a 2-page summary. The photograph showed a young woman, maybe 19, with bright eyes and a smile that suggested she believed the world was fundamentally good. The summary explained why she'd been wrong. Her name had been Emily Vasquez, past tense, because 3 months ago she'd been found dead in her apartment. The official cause of death was suicide. Her family knew better. She worked for Paramount Industries, Adrian said quietly. Data entry, nothing glamorous, but she was smart, observant. She noticed discrepancies in the financial records she was processing, money moving in ways that didn't make sense. Lena studied the photograph, memorizing the girl's face. She reported it. To her supervisor first, then to HR when her supervisor told her to mind her own business. 2 weeks later, she was found dead. Single gunshot wound to the head. Her own gun, registered in her name. No note, but the police found evidence of depression, antidepressants in her medicine cabinet, therapy appointments in her calendar. Staged, Lena said immediately. That's what her parents think, but they can't prove it. The police investigation was perfunctory at best. Paramount has friends in the department. The case was closed in 72 hours. Lena set down the photograph with shaking hands. What are the discrepancies she found? That's what I need you to figure out. Her parents have her personal laptop. The police returned it after determining it contained nothing relevant to their investigation. But Emily was cautious. If she documented what she found, she would have hidden it well. You want me to go through a dead girl's computer looking for evidence of corporate fraud that might have gotten her killed? I want you to find out if she was murdered, Adrian said. And if she was, I want you to help me make sure the people responsible pay for it. Lena looked at him across the desk, seeing something in his expression she hadn't noticed before. This wasn't just another case to him. This was personal in a way the others hadn't been. You knew her, she said. Adrian's jaw tightened. Her father was a client of mine 5 years ago. Different matter, long since resolved. But I remembered him. Good man, worked construction, loved his daughter more than anything in the world. When he called me about Emily, I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Defeat. Like he'd already accepted that justice wasn't coming. So you're going to give it to him? We are, Adrian corrected. If you're willing. Lena picked up the photograph again. Emily Vasquez stared back at her, frozen in a moment when she'd still been alive, still believed in doing the right thing, just like Lena had once believed, just like Carlos Ruiz and Thomas Chen and everyone else who'd discovered that sometimes the system protected the wrong people. I'm willing, she said. 2 hours later, Lena sat in the Vasquez family's small house in Daly City, the same neighborhood where Maria Ruiz lived. Mr. Vasquez was a large man with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much grief. His wife sat beside him on the couch, clutching a tissue and trying not to cry. Thank you for seeing me, Lena said gently. I know this is difficult. The police say our daughter killed herself, Mrs. Vasquez said, her voice breaking. They say she was depressed, but Emily wasn't. She was happy. She called us the night before she died. She was excited about something she'd discovered at work. She said she was going to make things right. Did she tell you what she'd discovered? Mr. Vasquez shook his head. She said it was complicated. Something about money not adding up. She wanted to be sure before she told us more. And the next day she was dead, Lena said softly. They want us to believe she bought a gun, went home, and shot herself, Mr. Vasquez said, his voice rough with anger. But Emily hated guns. She was terrified of them. There's no way she would have... He couldn't finish. His wife took his hand, holding on like she was afraid he might disappear too. I need to look at her laptop, Lena said. Emily was trying to expose something. If I can find what she found, we might be able to prove this wasn't suicide. The police already looked, Mrs. Vasquez said. They said there was nothing there. The police weren't looking for the right thing, Lena said. May I see it? They led her to Emily's bedroom, which had been preserved exactly as she'd left it. Posters on the walls, books on the shelves, a laptop sitting on a desk covered with post-it notes and coffee cup rings. Lena felt like an intruder in a shrine. She opened the laptop and waited for it to boot up. No password protection. Emily had trusted the people around her. The desktop was organized, files labeled clearly, everything in its place. The kind of order that suggested a methodical mind. Lena spent an hour going through documents, emails, browser history. Nothing obviously incriminating, nothing that screamed corporate conspiracy. But Emily had been smart. If she'd found something dangerous, she wouldn't have left it sitting in plain sight. Lena opened the file directory and started looking at metadata, when files were created, modified, accessed. And there, buried in a folder labeled Recipes of All Things, she found a spreadsheet that had been modified the day before Emily died. The spreadsheet was titled Grocery List, but contained nothing about groceries. Instead, it was a carefully constructed analysis of financial transactions at Paramount Industries. Money flowing from the main corporate accounts into a series of shell companies. Amounts that started small and grew larger over time. A pattern that Lena recognized immediately because she'd seen it before. This wasn't just fraud. This was money laundering on a massive scale. Lena's heart pounded as she traced the connections Emily had documented. The shell companies had names that sounded legitimate. Western Holdings, LLC, Pacific Investment Group, Cascade Financial Services. But they all shared the same registered agent. And that agent was connected to a law firm that Lena knew specialized in offshore accounts and tax evasion. Emily had stumbled onto a criminal enterprise operating inside a legitimate business, and she documented it with the precision of someone who understood exactly what she was looking at. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, Emily had added a note. Total transferred in last 18 months, $47 million. Need to verify before reporting. Meeting with HR Monday. She'd never made it to that meeting. Lena copied the entire file onto an encrypted drive, then kept searching. If Emily had been thorough enough to document the transactions, she might have been thorough enough to document what happened when she reported it. She found it in Emily's email drafts. An unsent message addressed to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, dated the day she died. The email laid out everything: the suspicious transactions, the shell companies, her attempts to report it internally, the threats from her supervisor. At the end, Emily had written, "I'm sending this now because I'm scared. My supervisor knows I have this information. He told me today that I should forget what I saw if I know what's good for me. I don't feel safe." The email had never been sent, which meant someone had gotten to her first. Lena closed the laptop, feeling sick. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance. This was murder. She found Adrian waiting in his car outside the Vasquez house. He took one look at her face and knew. "She was killed," he said. "Murdered," Lena corrected, climbing into the passenger seat. Emily found evidence of money laundering. $47 million moved through shell companies over 18 months. She reported it to her supervisor, who threatened her. She was about to go to the FBI when someone stopped her. "Can you prove it?" "I can prove the fraud. The murder is harder. But Adrian, if we can show that Emily discovered this scheme and was killed before she could report it, we can force a real investigation. Not some rubber stamp police inquiry, but a federal investigation into both the fraud and her death." Adrian started the car, his jaw set in a hard line. "Then that's what we do." "It's going to be dangerous," Lena warned. "We're talking about people who committed murder to protect their operation. They won't hesitate to do it again." "I know. And it's going to require us to cross lines we haven't crossed before. We can't just threaten bad publicity or legal action. We need to actually build a criminal case and hand it to the FBI. I know that too. Lena studied his profile in the dim light of the car. Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just because you knew her father. This feels personal. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. My mother wasn't just denied an insurance claim, he said. She was working for a company that was committing fraud. She discovered it, she tried to report it, and they destroyed her for it. By the time she got sick, she had no insurance, no savings, nothing, because she'd done the right thing and the system punished her for it. I'm sorry, Lena said. Don't be sorry, be effective. He looked at her. That's what you told me this was about, right? Making a difference that matters? Yes? Then let's make a difference. Let's show Emily's parents that their daughter didn't die for nothing. Let's prove that sometimes the good guys actually win. Over the next week, Lena built a case that would have made her former partners at Morrison and Webb weep with envy. She traced every transaction Emily had documented, verified every shell company, confirmed every connection. She found bank records that shouldn't have been accessible but were if you knew the right back doors. She found corporate filings that told a story of systematic theft. She found enough evidence to put a dozen executives in prison for the rest of their lives. But none of it proved Emily was murdered. That proof came from an unexpected source. Lena was working late in Adrian's office, her eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Lena Carter? A woman's voice, young and scared. Who's asking? My name is Jessica Tran. I worked with Emily Vasquez at Paramount. I heard you're investigating her death. Lena sat up straighter. Where did you hear that? Emily's mom mentioned it to my mom. They're friends from church. I need to talk to you, but not on the phone. Can we meet? They met at a coffee shop in the Sunset District at 10 p.m., when it was nearly empty. Jessica was in her mid-20s, nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder like she expected someone to be watching. I should have come forward sooner, she said, wrapping her hands around a coffee she wasn't drinking. But I was scared. I'm still scared. Take your time, Lena said gently. Tell me what you know. Jessica took a shaky breath. Emily and I were friends. We started at Paramount the same week, did our training together. When she found those financial discrepancies, she told me about them. She was excited. She thought she was going to help clean up the company, get promoted maybe. But that's not what happened. Her supervisor called her into his office the day before she died. I was at the desk next to theirs. The walls are thin. I heard him tell her to delete everything she'd found. Said it was above her pay grade, and she was stirring up trouble where there wasn't any. Did Emily agree? No, she said she was going to HR. And that's when he said it. Jessica's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said, You have no idea what you're messing with. These people don't play games. If you push this, you're going to regret it. Did you tell the police this? I tried, but by the time I worked up the courage to go to the station, the case was already closed. The detective I spoke to said Emily's death was clearly suicide, that her supervisor was just trying to protect her from workplace gossip, and that I should focus on my own job if I knew what was good for me. Lena felt cold. The police were covering for Paramount, or someone was paying them to look the other way. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Emily was my friend. She was good and brave, and she deserved better than this. I want to help. Tell me what you need. I need you to testify, Lena said. Not in court, not yet, but to the FBI. To tell them what you heard. To give them a reason to investigate. They'll fire me. Probably worse. Probably, Lena agreed. I won't lie to you, Jessica. This is going to cost you. But Emily already paid the highest price. The question is whether her death means something. Jessica wiped her eyes. What do I need to do? 3 days later, Lena and Adrian sat in a conference room at the FBI's San Francisco field office, across from 2 special agents who looked like they'd heard every conspiracy theory in the book and believed none of them. The older agent, Morrison, had salt and pepper hair and the weary expression of someone who'd been a bureaucrat too long. The younger one, Chen, looked fresh out of Quantico and hungry to prove herself. Let me make sure I understand, Morrison said, flipping through the binder Lena had prepared. You're alleging that Paramount Industries has been laundering money through shell companies, that a young woman discovered this scheme and was murdered to keep her quiet, and that the local police department is complicit in covering up the murder. Is that correct? That's exactly correct, Lena said. And your evidence is... Go. A detailed financial analysis conducted by the victim, showing $47 million move through suspicious channels. Corporate records proving these shell companies exist, but have no legitimate business purpose. Bank records showing a pattern of transfers that match classic money laundering behavior. And eyewitness testimony from a coworker who heard the victim being threatened the day before her death. Agent Chen leaned forward, interested despite herself. You have bank records? How did you obtain those? Through publicly available sources and information provided by concerned parties, Lena said smoothly, which was technically true if you considered hacking into poorly secured databases to be a publicly available source. Morrison looked skeptical. And you expect us to launch a federal investigation based on information gathered by a... He glanced at a note in front of him. Consultant who is not licensed to practice law and has a history of ethical violations? Lena felt Adrian tense beside her, but she kept her voice level. The ethical violations you're referring to were me exposing a $2 billion fraud scheme at my own law firm. I was blacklisted for doing the right thing, Agent Morrison, which is exactly what happened to Emily Vasquez. The question isn't whether I'm credible. The question is whether you're willing to look at evidence of a crime because it was brought to you by someone the legal establishment decided to punish. Morrison's expression didn't change, but Agent Chen's did. She pulled the binder toward her, flipping through the financial analysis with growing attention. This is sophisticated work, she said. Whoever compiled this knew exactly what they were looking at. Emily Vasquez was a data entry clerk with an associate's degree and better instincts than most forensic accountants, Lena said. She figured it out with access to nothing but the transactions she was processing. Imagine what you could find with subpoena power. Chen looked at her partner. We should at least look into this. Based on what? Morrison said. A civilian's financial analysis and one witness who didn't come forward until 3 months after the alleged murder? Based on a pattern that matches a dozen other cases we've investigated, Chen argued. Money laundering operations using shell companies and legitimate businesses as fronts. It's textbook. It's also circumstantial. So was the evidence that started the Meridian investigation, Lena said quietly. And that led to 12 convictions and $2 billion in recovered assets. Morrison looked at her sharply. You worked that case. I broke that case. And I'm telling you right now, this is the same kind of operation. Different scale, different industry, same crime. Emily Vasquez found it. She tried to report it, and she was killed before she could. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Morrison closed the binder. We'll review your materials, he said. If we determine there's enough evidence to warrant further investigation, we'll be in touch. It was a dismissal, but it wasn't a no. Lena stood, Adrian following her lead. One more thing, she said. Emily Vasquez drafted an email to your office the day she died. It's in her email drafts, never sent. In it, she explains everything she found and says she's afraid for her safety. You might want to pull that before someone at Paramount deletes it. Agent Chen wrote that down. Morrison just looked tired. Outside the FBI building, Adrian turned to Lena. That went better than I expected. They're going to investigate, Lena said with certainty. Chen wants to. Morrison is cautious, but he's not corrupt. Once they start pulling on this thread, they'll find more than Emily ever could have. And if they don't, then we go to the press. We make so much noise that they have to investigate just to make us go away. Adrian smiled. You've changed. How so? 3 weeks ago, you were cleaning houses and trying to be invisible. Now you're blackmailing insurance companies, exposing medical device fraud, and forcing the FBI to investigate murder. You've remembered who you are. Lena thought about that. He was right. She had changed. Or maybe she'd just stopped pretending to be someone else. The woman who'd walked into that ballroom and danced like no one was watching, that was who she'd always been. She'd just forgotten for a while. I'm remembering a lot of things, she said, including the fact that fighting in the gray spaces between law and justice felt more honest than anything she'd done in her years at Morrison and Webb. Back then, she'd told herself she was serving justice by playing by the rules, but the rules had been written by people with power to protect people with power. Operating outside those rules, bending them, breaking them when necessary. That was how you actually helped people who needed help. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop asking questions about Emily Vasquez. This is your only warning." Lena showed the message to Adrian. His expression darkened. "They're watching you." "Good," Lena said. "Means we're close to something they want to protect." "Lena, they killed Emily. They won't hesitate to... I know what they'll do," she interrupted, "but I'm not backing down. Not now. Not when we're this close. At least let me arrange security for you." "I don't need security. I need evidence." But that night, alone in her small room, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Emily Vasquez, about the photograph of a young woman who'd believed doing the right thing would be enough, about the draft email that had never been sent, about all the ways the system had failed her. And she thought about the threatening text message. Someone at Paramount knew she was investigating. Someone was scared enough to try to intimidate her, which meant she was right. Lena got out of bed and opened her laptop. She had copies of everything: Emily's financial analysis, the shell company records, the email drafts, Jessica's statement. She'd backed it all up in 3 separate locations, encrypted and hidden. If something happened to her, Adrian would know where to find it. She started typing an email to Agent Chen, laying out additional details she hadn't included in the formal presentation. Connections she'd found between Paramount's executives and known organized crime figures. Patterns in the shell company transfers that suggested this operation had been running for years, maybe decades. At 3 a.m., she sent the email. At 3:15, her phone rang. "Agent Chen. Ms. Carter, I'm looking at your email. How did you obtain information about ongoing federal investigations into organized crime? I'm a very good researcher. These connections you've drawn, if they're accurate, this isn't just money laundering. This is a major criminal conspiracy." "I know." "You need to be careful. If Paramount is connected to the people you're suggesting, you're in danger." "I'm aware." "Let me assign protective custody." "No. That alerts them that the FBI is taking this seriously. They'll destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, make it impossible to prove anything." Chen was quiet for a moment. "You're thinking like an investigator." "I used to be very good at my job," Lena said, "before it became inconvenient. Morrison approved a preliminary investigation this afternoon. After you left. Your presentation was persuasive, but it was your history that convinced him. Anyone willing to sacrifice their career to expose corruption is someone who doesn't fabricate evidence." Lena felt something warm spread through her chest. Vindication, maybe. Or just relief that someone in authority believed her. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Stay available. Don't do anything illegal. And for the love of God, watch your back." The investigation moved faster than Lena had expected. Within a week, the FBI had subpoenaed Paramount's financial records. Within 2 weeks, they'd identified the shell companies and traced their connections to a money laundering network that stretched across 3 states. Within 3 weeks, they'd arrested Paramount's CFO and 2 senior vice presidents. And then things got complicated. The day after the arrests, Lena received a call from a lawyer representing Paramount Industries. His name was Marcus Holloway, and his firm was the kind that defended Fortune 500 companies against inconvenient accusations. "Ms. Carter, I'm calling to inform you that Paramount Industries is filing a defamation lawsuit against you and Adrian Vieri for making false and malicious accusations that have damaged the company's reputation." Lena laughed. "The FBI just arrested your executives for money laundering. Where exactly is the defamation?" "The arrests are unrelated to your baseless allegations regarding Emily Vasquez's death. The medical examiner ruled her death a suicide, and you've been spreading vicious rumors suggesting otherwise." "I provided evidence to federal investigators. That's not defamation. That's cooperation with law enforcement. You provided stolen financial records and coerced testimony. We're prepared to pursue criminal charges as well as civil remedies." "Go ahead," Lena said. "I'm sure a jury will love hearing about how your client threatens people who try to investigate them." "Boom. This is your opportunity to walk away," Holloway said, his tone hardening. "Drop your investigation, stop talking to the press, and we'll forget this conversation happened." "Or what? You'll sue me? I don't have anything worth taking. You'll have me arrested? For what exactly? Being too good at following the money?" "You're making a mistake." "I've made plenty of mistakes," Lena said. This isn't one of them. She hung up and immediately called Adrian. Paramount's lawyers just threatened me with defamation and criminal charges. Let me guess, Marcus Holloway? You know him? Unfortunately, he specializes in intimidating whistleblowers. Did he make any specific threats? Just vague implications that I'd committed crimes and should stop investigating before something bad happens. Adrian was quiet for a moment. They're scared. The FBI investigation is expanding, and they know Emily's death is going to be reopened. They're trying to shut us down before we can provide more evidence. So what do? We go harder. I've got a friend at the Chronicle who's been following the Paramount case. I think it's time we told him about Emily. The article ran 3 days later, front page of the Sunday edition. The headline read, "Did money laundering scheme lead to young woman's death?" The story laid out everything. Emily's discovery of the fraud, her attempts to report it, the threats from her supervisor, her suspicious death, and the FBI's ongoing investigation. Jessica Tran was quoted, using her real name despite the risk. The Vasquez family was interviewed, showing photos of Emily and describing their daughter as a person who'd believed in doing the right thing. And Lena was mentioned as the investigator who'd connected the dots between Emily's discovery and her death. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the story had been picked up by national news outlets. By Monday morning, Paramount stock had dropped 23%. By Tuesday, the CEO had resigned. And by Wednesday, Agent Chen called to tell Lena that the medical examiner's office was reopening Emily's case based on new evidence the FBI had uncovered. What new evidence? Lena asked. Security footage from Emily's apartment building that the police somehow failed to collect during their initial investigation. It shows 2 men entering her apartment the night she died. They were there for 47 minutes. Emily's time of death was estimated during that window. Lena closed her eyes, feeling sick and vindicated in equal measure. So it was murder. It was murder. And we have forensic evidence suggesting the scene was staged to look like suicide. The gun residue patterns don't match a self-inflicted wound. The angle of entry is wrong. The police investigation was either incompetent or deliberately compromised. What happens now? Now we build a case against everyone involved. The executives who ordered it, the men who carried it out, and the cops who helped cover it up. This is going to get ugly, Ms. Carter. Good, Lena said. It should be ugly. Emily deserves ugly. She deserves the truth, whatever that looks like. That evening, Lena stood in Adrian's office, looking out at the city lights below. They'd won. Emily's death would be investigated properly. The people responsible would be held accountable. Justice, messy and imperfect, and 3 months too late, was coming. You did it, Adrian said from behind her. You proved she was murdered. We did it, Lena corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You could have. You just needed someone to remind you that you were capable of it. Lena turned to face him. Is that what you do? Remind people they're capable? I give them the opportunity to be who they really are. What they do with that opportunity is up to them. And what am I, really? Adrian crossed the room until he was standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. You're someone who fights, he said quietly. Not because it's easy or profitable or safe, but because you can't help yourself. You see injustice, and you can't walk away from it. That's who you've always been, Lena. You just forgot for a while. I was tired, she admitted. Tired of fighting and losing. Tired of being punished for doing the right thing. And now? Now I'm angry. And anger is easier than tired. Adrian smiled. Anger is fuel. Use it. Lena realized how close they were standing, how easy it would be to close the distance between them, how much she wanted to. But before she could move, her phone rang. Agent Chen again. We've arrested 4 people in connection with Emily Vasquez's murder, Chen said without preamble, including a detective in the SFPD who helped cover it up. We're going to need your testimony when this goes to trial. You'll have it, Lena said. There's something else. The investigation into Paramount's money laundering operation has uncovered connections to other businesses, legitimate companies that are being used as fronts for criminal activity. The Justice Department wants to know if you'd be willing to consult on those cases. Lena looked at Adrian, who was watching her with quiet intensity. Consult in what capacity? She asked. As a financial investigator. helping us trace money flows, identify patterns, build cases. The work you've been doing for Adrian Vieri, but with federal resources and legal authority. It was an offer to come in from the cold, to work within the system again, with all the protection and legitimacy that entailed, to stop operating in the gray spaces and return to the light. I need to think about it, Lena said. Of course. But Ms. Carter, you're exceptionally good at this. Don't let what happened at Morrison and Webb convince you otherwise. After she hung up, Adrian raised an eyebrow. The FBI wants to hire you. To consult, same work, different letterhead. You're going to say no. It wasn't a question. Lena realized he knew her answer before she did. The system didn't protect Emily Vasquez, she said. It didn't protect Maria Ruiz or Thomas Chen or your mother or any of the hundreds of people who get crushed every day by institutions designed to serve the powerful. Working for the FBI means working within rules that are fundamentally broken. Working with me means operating outside those rules, which is exactly where the work needs to be done. Adrian's smile was slow and dangerous and entirely approving. So you're staying? I'm staying. If you'll have me. Lena Carter, you're the best thing that's happened to this operation since I started it. The question has never been whether I'd have you. It's whether you'd stay once you remembered how good you are at this. I'm staying because I'm good at it, Lena said. Because Emily and Maria and Thomas and everyone else who gets destroyed for doing the right thing deserves someone who's willing to fight dirty on their behalf. That's what you do here, isn't it? Fight dirty for the right reasons? That's exactly what we do. Then count me in. Officially. Not as a consultant or a one-time hire. As your partner. Adrian extended his hand. Welcome to the Gray, Counselor. Lena shook his hand, feeling the electricity that had been building between them for weeks spark and hold. I'm not a counselor anymore, she said. No, Adrian agreed, pulling her slightly closer. You're something much more dangerous. This time, when Lena closed the distance between them, he met her halfway. The kiss was inevitable and electric and tasted like victory and vengeance in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. That was probably a terrible idea, he said. Probably, Lena agreed. Want to do it again? Instead of answering, she kissed him again, harder this time, channeling 3 weeks of adrenaline and anger and the bone-deep satisfaction of winning into something fierce and necessary. They spent that night in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, and Lena realized that this, the fighting, the danger, the man who saw exactly who she was and wanted her anyway, this was what it felt like to be alive. Not safe, not comfortable, not respectable, but alive in a way she'd never felt, wearing designer suits and playing by rules written by people who'd never had to choose between their integrity and their survival. The next morning, Lena woke up to find Adrian already awake, working on his laptop in bed. New case? She asked. 3 new cases. Word is getting out that we're good at impossible situations. Show me. He handed her the laptop. 3 files, 3 people who'd been failed by the system and needed someone willing to bend it into something resembling justice. Which one do we take first? Adrian asked. Lena read through the summaries, her mind already working through strategies and angles and ways to make the powerful answer for what they'd done. All of them, she said. We take all of them. Because that was who she was now. Not the woman who'd hidden in the shadows for 3 years. Not the lawyer who'd believed the system would reward her integrity. She was Lena Carter, financial investigator, justice seeker, woman who'd learned that sometimes you had to break the rules to make things right. And she was just getting started. The 3 cases Adrian had shown her that morning were merely the beginning. By the end of the week, 7 more had arrived. By the end of the month, they were turning people away. Lena sat in what had become her office, the space next to Adrian's with a view almost as good, and watched the sun set over San Francisco while she reviewed a case that made her want to put her fist through a wall. A construction worker who'd been injured on the job when his employer violated safety regulations, then fired and blacklisted when he tried to file a workers' compensation claim. The man had 3 kids and a mortgage. His employer had a team of lawyers and no conscience. We can't take them all, Adrian said from her doorway. Lena looked up. He was holding 2 glasses of wine, which had become their evening ritual. Take a case, win a case, drink wine while planning the next one. It was a routine that felt dangerously close to domestic, except for the part where they were systematically dismantling corporate America's worst impulses. "Why not?" she asked, taking the glass he offered. "Because there are only two of us. Because you haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 weeks. Because eventually, you're going to burn out." "I'm fine." "You're running on rage and coffee. That's not sustainable." Lena set down her wine glass, harder than necessary. "You know what's not sustainable? The number of people getting destroyed by companies that treat human beings like disposable resources. This construction worker, his name is David Martinez. He's 42 years old. He fell 3 stories because his employer refused to pay for proper safety equipment. He shattered both legs, and instead of taking responsibility, they fired him and made sure he'd never work in construction again." "I know. Do you?" "Because while we're sitting here debating whether we can take his case, David Martinez is trying to figure out how to explain to his kids why they might lose their house." Adrian crossed the room and sat on the edge of her desk. "I know because I read the file. I know because I've seen 100 cases just like his. And I know that if we take every case that breaks our hearts, we'll be too exhausted to win any of them." Lena hated that he was right. She'd been feeling it for the past week, the way her concentration slipped after midnight, the way her hand shook from too much caffeine, the way she sometimes forgot whether she'd eaten that day. She was pushing too hard, and they both knew it. "So what do we do?" she asked quietly. "Just tell him no? Tell him his suffering isn't quite compelling enough to make the cut?" "We hire help," Adrian said. "We build something bigger than just the two of us." "You want to expand." "I want to build an empire." He smiled at her expression. "Not the kind that exploits people, the kind that protects them. We bring in more investigators, more researchers, maybe even a few lawyers who still believe in justice over billable hours. That costs money. We have money. The Fortress financial settlement came with a finder's fee. So did the Novus case. We're not rich, but we have enough to hire 2, maybe 3 good people." Lena thought about it. The idea of bringing others into their operation felt both necessary and dangerous. Necessary because Adrian was right. They couldn't do this alone. Dangerous because the work they did required a particular kind of person, someone willing to operate in the gray spaces, someone who'd already been burned by the system and had nothing left to lose. "We'd need the right people," she said. "I have some ideas." Of course he did. Adrian always had ideas. Over the next month, they hired 3 people who turned out to be exactly what they needed. The first was Marcus Reed, a former FBI agent who'd quit after watching his superiors bury an investigation into police corruption. He was 58, tired of playing politics, and still possessed investigative instincts that bordered on supernatural. The second was Sarah Kim, a data analyst who'd been fired from a tech company for refusing to manipulate user data in ways she considered unethical. She was 29, brilliant with computers, and angry enough to make her dangerous. The third was James Wheeler, a lawyer who'd been disbarred for threatening a judge who was taking bribes from the defendant in one of his cases. He was 45, still bitter about the disbarment, and possessed a legal mind that could find loopholes in a brick wall. Together, they formed something that wasn't quite a law firm and wasn't quite a private investigation agency. Adrian called it Vieri Consulting. Lena called it Organized Chaos. Their clients called it their last hope. With the expanded team, they took on more cases. The construction worker got his workers' compensation and his job back after Marcus found evidence that the employer had systematically violated safety regulations for years. A woman who'd been sexually harassed by her boss got a settlement that made the news after Sarah uncovered emails proving the company had known about the harassment and done nothing. A small business owner who'd been crushed by predatory lending got his business back after James found that the lender had violated federal disclosure requirements. They won. They kept winning, and every victory felt like vindication for every time the system had failed them. But success brought attention, and attention brought danger. It started with small things. Anonymous emails warning them to back off certain cases, phone calls that disconnected when they answered, cars that followed Lena home from the office before disappearing into traffic. Then it escalated. Lena was working late one night, alone in the office while the others had gone home, when she heard footsteps in the hallway. The building should have been empty except for security, but these weren't a security guard's footsteps. These were deliberate, measured, the sound of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She stood from her desk, her heart racing, and moved toward the door. Before she could reach it, two men entered her office. They were both large, both wearing suits that didn't quite hide the fact they were built for violence rather than boardrooms. "Ms. Carter," the first one said. He had a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. "We need to talk about the Sanderson case." The Sanderson case. A whistleblower lawsuit against Meridian Defense, a military contractor that had been overcharging the government for defective equipment. Lena and her team had been building a case based on documents provided by an engineer who'd been fired for refusing to sign off on equipment that didn't meet specifications. "I don't discuss active cases with people who break into my office," Lena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This isn't a discussion," the second man said. He was shorter but somehow more menacing, with cold eyes that suggested he'd done things he didn't lose sleep over. "This is a message. Drop the Sanderson case. Walk away. Forget you ever heard of Meridian Defense." "Or what?" The first man smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Lena had ever seen. "Or we'll make sure you can't work on any cases ever again, permanently." It was a death threat, unambiguous and delivered with the casual confidence of men who'd made such threats before and followed through on them. Lena's phone was on her desk, too far to reach before they could stop her. The office door was behind them. There was no good way out of this that didn't involve compliance or violence. She chose neither. "I'm going to give you one chance to leave," she said, her voice colder than she'd known it could be. "Right now, before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing and making terroristic threats." "You're not calling anyone," the second man said, taking a step toward her. "She doesn't need to." Adrian's voice came from the doorway. He stood there with Marcus beside him, and Marcus was holding something that Lena realized with a jolt was a gun. "Gentlemen," Marcus said pleasantly, "I'm a former federal agent with a carry permit and a legal obligation to protect my colleagues from credible threats. You have about 5 seconds to leave this building before I decide you constitute such a threat." The two men looked at each other, calculating odds. Whatever conclusion they reached, it involved leaving. They walked past Adrian and Marcus without another word, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. When they were gone, Lena's legs gave out. She sat down hard in her desk chair, shaking. "How did you know?" she asked. "Building security called me," Adrian said, crossing the room to her. "Said 2 men had bypassed the front desk and gone to our floor. I called Marcus and we got here as fast as we could." "They threatened to kill me." "I know." Adrian knelt beside her chair. "Are you okay?" "No." "Yes, I don't know." Lena ran her hands through her hair. "This is different from threatening lawsuits or bad publicity. These people are willing to commit murder to protect their interests." "Which means the Sanderson case is bigger than we thought," Marcus said, holstering his weapon. "Meridian Defense doesn't send muscle to scare off investigators unless they're protecting something worth killing for." "We should go to the police," Lena said. "And tell them what?" Marcus asked. 2 unidentified men made vague threats and left without touching you? The cops will take a report and file it somewhere it'll never be seen again. Meridian has contracts with the Defense Department worth billions. They have friends everywhere. So we just accept being threatened? "We double down," Adrian said. "We find out what Meridian is really hiding, and then we burn them to the ground." The Sanderson case consumed them for the next 3 weeks. Sarah worked around the clock tracing financial irregularities in Meridian's government contracts. James found procurement regulations that Meridian had systematically violated. Marcus interviewed former employees who'd been fired or forced out when they questioned the company's practices. And Lena followed the money. What she found was staggering in its audacity. Meridian had been billing the Department of Defense for equipment that met military specifications, but delivering equipment that didn't. The difference in manufacturing costs was substantial, millions of dollars per contract. Over 10 years, they defrauded the government of an estimated $300 million. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the defective equipment was being used by soldiers in combat zones, body armor that didn't meet ballistic standards, communication equipment that failed under stress, vehicle components that malfunctioned in extreme temperatures. People had died because of Meridian's fraud. Soldiers had been killed because the company had chosen profit over their safety. "This is bigger than corporate fraud," Lena said at their team meeting. "This is treason." "Legally, probably not," James said. "But morally, absolutely. They've been selling defective equipment to the military while billing for the real thing. That's fraud, breach of contract, and involuntary manslaughter at minimum. Who do we take this to? Sarah asked. The FBI? The Defense Department's Inspector General, Marcus said. They have jurisdiction over contractor fraud, but we need ironclad evidence. Documents, witness testimony, physical proof that the equipment doesn't meet specifications. I can get the documents, Sarah said. I've been working on accessing their internal quality control database. Give me another week. We don't have a week, Adrian said. Those men who threatened Lena weren't making an idle threat. The longer we dig, the more dangerous this becomes. So we accelerate, Lena said. Sarah, can you get into that database in 72 hours? If I don't sleep and mainline coffee, maybe. Then do it. Marcus, talk to your contacts at the IG's office. Give them a heads up that something big is coming. James, prepare the legal framework for filing a qui tam lawsuit under the False Claims Act. If Meridian wants a war, we'll give them one. Over the next 3 days, they worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Sarah barely left her desk, her fingers flying across keyboards as she navigated Meridian's security systems. Marcus made calls to people he'd worked with during his FBI days, building support for an investigation before they'd even filed formal charges. James drafted a complaint that was simultaneously a legal document and a moral indictment, and Lena coordinated it all, making sure every piece fit together, every connection was documented, every fact was verified 3 times. She barely saw Adrian except in passing. He was managing their other cases, keeping the business running while she focused on Meridian. But late at night, when everyone else had gone home, he'd appear in her office with food she forgot to eat and coffee she desperately needed. You're going to make yourself sick, he said on the 3rd night, setting down a container of Thai food. I'm fine. You said that right before you nearly passed out in the office last month. That was different. I had the flu. You had exhaustion disguised as the flu. Adrian sat across from her. Lena, I know this case matters. I know what Meridian did is unconscionable. But you matter too. You can't win if you work yourself into the ground. People died because of what they did, Lena said, her voice breaking slightly. Soldiers who trusted that their equipment would protect them. They died because some executives decided profit was more important than human lives. I know. So how am I supposed to sleep knowing that? How am I supposed to take a break when every hour we delay is another hour? Meridian gets to keep operating? Adrian reached across the desk and took her hand. You sleep because you're no good to anyone if you collapse. You take a break because this is a marathon, not a sprint. And you trust that we're doing everything we can, as fast as we can, without sacrificing the quality that makes us effective. Well, Lena wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was finally catching up with her. She could feel it in her bones, in the way her vision blurred around the edges, in the way her thoughts felt sluggish and disconnected. I hate that you're right, she said. I know. It's one of my most annoying qualities. He stood and pulled her to her feet. Come on, you're going to eat something, and then I'm taking you home. Oh, I need to review Sarah's preliminary findings. Sarah's findings will still be there in the morning. You won't be functional enough to understand them if you don't sleep. He was right, and Lena was too tired to fight him. She let him drive her home, let him make sure she actually ate the Thai food, let him tuck her into bed like she was something precious that needed protecting. Stay, she said as he turned to leave. Adrian paused in the doorway. Lena, I don't want to be alone. Not tonight. Not after those men threaten me. Not while we're fighting people who've already proven they're willing to kill. He came back, kicked off his shoes, and lay down beside her on top of the covers. Lena curled against him, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I'm scared, she admitted in the darkness. Good. Fear keeps you careful. I'm also angry. Even better, anger keeps you fighting. And I'm falling in love with you, which is probably the stupidest thing I could do given that we work together and our lives are constantly in danger. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. It's not stupid, he said quietly. It's just terrible timing. Is there ever good timing for this kind of thing? Probably not. But for what it's worth, I'm falling in love with you too. Have been since I watched you dance in that ballroom and realized you were the most dangerous woman I'd ever met. Lena tilted her head up to look at him. Dangerous how? Dangerous because you make me want things I thought I'd given up on, like partnership, like building something that matters with someone who understands why it matters, like the possibility that fighting for justice doesn't have to be a lonely crusade. She kissed him then, soft and slow and full of all the things they hadn't said, and for a few hours they let themselves forget about Meridian defense and death threats and the weight of carrying other people's hopes for justice. They just held each other and pretended the world outside could wait until morning. Sarah broke into Meridian's database at 4 a.m. on the fourth day. By 6 a.m., she'd downloaded enough documentation to prove fraud on a massive scale. By 8 a.m., Marcus had called his contact at the Inspector General's office. By noon, federal investigators were executing search warrants at Meridian's headquarters and 3 manufacturing facilities. By 5 p.m., the CEO of Meridian Defense had been arrested. Lena watched the news coverage from the office, surrounded by her team. They'd done it. They'd taken on a military contractor with billions in government contracts and unlimited resources, and they'd won. How does it feel? Sarah asked.
Surreal, Lena admitted. 3 months ago, I was cleaning houses. Now I'm watching the CEO of a defense contractor do a perp walk on live television. You did this, Marcus said. You found the fraud. You built the case. You made it impossible for them to hide. We did this, Lena corrected. All of us. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway.
Miss Carter, this is Richard Sanderson, the whistleblower whose information had started the entire investigation. I'm watching the news. I can't believe they actually arrested him. They're actually going to face consequences. They are, Lena confirmed. And it's because of you, because you had the courage to come forward. I thought I'd lost everything for nothing. My job, my reputation, my security clearance. I thought I'd sacrificed everything and nobody would care. Your sacrifice mattered, Lena said. The soldiers who were using that defective equipment, they're going to get justice because of you. The taxpayers who were being defrauded, they're going to get their money back because of you. None of this happens without your courage. Richard was crying on the other end of the line. Thank you. Thank you for believing me when everyone else said I was crazy. After he hung up, Lena stood at the window looking out at the city. Adrian came to stand beside her, slipping his hand into hers.
3 months, he said, and that's all it's been since I found you dancing in that ballroom. 3 months, and you've changed everything. We've changed everything, Lena said. No, I've been doing this work for 5 years. I've won cases, helped people, made a difference. But you brought something I didn't have, the ability to see patterns I miss, the courage to take on cases that scare me, the moral clarity to know when we're fighting for the right reasons.
Well, Lena leaned her head on his shoulder.
I couldn't have done any of this without you. You gave me the chance to be who I really am. You saw me when I was invisible. You were never invisible. You were just hiding. There's a difference. I'm not hiding anymore. No. You're terrifying corporate America, bringing down fraudsters and making powerful people very nervous. It's incredibly attractive. Lena laughed. We're in serious danger. Multiple people want us dead, and we're working 80-hour weeks. This is your idea of attractive? This is my idea of a partnership worth having. Someone who fights as hard as I do. Someone who understands what we're really doing here. Which is what exactly? Adrian turned her to face him. Building an empire. Not of money or power or influence, but of justice. Creating a place where people who've been failed by the system can come for help. Showing that sometimes the rules need to be bent to make things right. That's a dangerous philosophy. It's the only philosophy that works. The system is designed to protect the powerful. If we're going to help the powerless, we have to be willing to operate outside that system, even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous, because the cases that scare us are usually the ones that matter most. Lena thought about that. 3 months ago, she would have argued, would have insisted that working within the system was the only ethical choice. But 3 months ago, she'd been a different person, a person who'd let the system break her, who'd accepted invisibility as the price of safety. Now she understood what Adrian had known all along. Safety was an illusion. The only real choice was whether you fought for what mattered or you let fear win. I have a proposition, she said. I'm listening. Make me a full partner, not just in the work, but in the business. Vieri Consulting becomes Vieri and Carter. We build this empire together.
Officially. Adrian's eyes widened slightly. That's a big step. I've already taken the big step. I'm all in on this, Adrian. On the work, on the mission, on us. I want it formalized. I want the world to know that we're building this together. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled that dangerous smile she'd first seen in the ballroom.
Vieri and Carter, he said, testing the words. I like the sound of that. So we're doing this? Instead of answering, Adrian kissed her. It was different from their other kisses, not passionate or desperate, but solid, a foundation being laid, a promise being made. When they broke apart, he kept his forehead pressed against hers. We're doing this, he said. Full partnership. Vieri and Carter, an empire built on justice and rage and the absolute certainty that we can make a difference. Even when it's terrifying. Especially when it's terrifying. That night, they celebrated with the team. Marcus brought champagne. Sarah ordered enough food to feed 12 people. James gave a toast about fighting the good fight and winning against impossible odds. They drank and ate and told stories about their victories until the city lights blurred into a canvas of possibility. And when everyone else had gone home, Lena and Adrian stayed in the office, revising the partnership paperwork and planning their next moves. They had 17 active cases, 43 more waiting for review, a reputation that was spreading through the communities of people who'd been failed by the system. They were building something that mattered, something that scared powerful people and gave hope to powerless ones, something that operated in the gray spaces where justice actually lived. Lena Carter had spent 3 years being invisible, convinced that safety was worth more than purpose. Now she understood the truth. She'd never been safe. She'd just been hiding from the fight she was meant to have. But she wasn't hiding anymore. She was standing in the light, building an empire with a man who saw exactly who she was and loved her for it. She was fighting battles that terrified her and winning against odds that should have been impossible. She was exactly where she belonged. And she was just getting started. The partnership papers were signed on a Wednesday morning in early autumn, 6 months after Adrian had found Lena dancing in that ballroom. She stood in the office that now bore both their names on the door, Vieri and Carter, Consulting, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not just satisfaction or vindication, but certainty. This was who she was meant to be. Second thoughts? Adrian asked, watching her from across the desk. Not even first thoughts, Lena said, signing the final page. This is right. But even as she said it, she felt the weight of what they'd built pressing down on her shoulders. 17 active cases. A team of 5, including them. A reputation that brought both clients desperate for help and enemies determined to stop them. Success had made them visible, and visibility brought danger they were only beginning to understand. The danger arrived 3 days later in the form of a lawsuit. Lena was reviewing financial documents for a case involving pension fraud when Marcus appeared in her doorway, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he said, dropping a thick legal document on her desk. "Multiple problems, actually." The lawsuit had been filed by a firm called Blackwood and Associates, representing 6 different corporations that Vieri and Carter had investigated over the past 6 months. The allegations were staggering in their scope. Defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, conspiracy to commit fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They were seeking $200 million in damages. "This is insane," Lena said, flipping through the complaint. "Half these allegations are complete fabrications. We never made any of these statements. They're claiming are defamatory." "Doesn't matter if they're true," James said, joining them. "What matters is that defending against this will cost us hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Maybe millions if it goes to trial. They're not trying to win. They're trying to bankrupt us." Adrian appeared in the doorway, his jaw set in a hard line. "I just got off the phone with our insurance carrier. They're declining coverage. Apparently our policy doesn't cover intentional acts. And Blackwood is arguing that everything we do is intentional." "Of course it's intentional," Sarah said from behind her laptop. "That's literally the job. Intentionally investigating fraud. Intentionally exposing corruption. Intentionally helping people the system failed." "Can we countersue?" Lena asked James. "For what? Filing a frivolous lawsuit? We'd have to prove it was frivolous, and they've been careful to include just enough legitimate-sounding allegations to survive a motion to dismiss. So what do we do?"
Marcus asked. Lena stood and walked to the window, her mind racing through options. This was exactly what powerful institutions did when whistleblowers and investigators got too close. They didn't argue the merits. They buried you in legal fees until you couldn't afford to fight anymore. We find out who's really behind this, she said. Blackwood and Associates is a small firm. They don't have the resources to coordinate a lawsuit this complex across 6 different corporate clients. Someone is funding this, someone with enough money and motivation to try to destroy us. How do we find that out? Sarah asked. Lena turned back to the room, a plan already forming. The same way we find out everything else. We follow the money. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah worked her digital magic while Lena and Marcus conducted old-fashioned investigation. What they discovered was worse than they'd imagined. The 6 corporations suing them were all connected to a private equity firm called Stratton Capital. And Stratton Capital was run by a man Lena recognized immediately, Richard Morrison, the senior partner at Morrison & Webb who'd led the charge to destroy her career 3 years ago. He's been tracking us, Lena said, spreading documents across the conference room table. Every case we've won, every corporation we've exposed, Morrison has been watching. Half of these companies are Stratton portfolio companies. We didn't just threaten individual businesses, we threatened his investment returns. So he's coordinating a counterattack, Adrian said, using Blackwood as a front to hide his involvement. Exactly. And it's brilliant in a sociopathic kind of way. If we fight the lawsuit, we drain our resources. If we settle, we look guilty and lose credibility. Either way, he wins. Unless we go after him directly, Marcus said. Lena shook her head. We can't prove he's behind this. All the funding is buried behind shell companies and legal privilege. Blackwood will claim attorney-client confidentiality if we try to subpoena their financial records. So we're stuck, Sarah said. No, Lena said slowly. We're thinking about this wrong. Morrison isn't trying to win in court. He's trying to destroy us financially. Which means the real battleground isn't the lawsuit. It's our ability to keep operating while we fight it. We can't operate without money, James pointed out. And we're going to bleed cash defending this thing. So we make money, Lena said. A lot of it, fast. Adrian raised an eyebrow. How? We go public with what we know. Not about Morrison, we can't prove that yet. But about the corporation suing us. We show the world exactly why they want us silenced. We turn this lawsuit into proof that we're effective enough to scare them. Well, that's a huge risk, Marcus said. If we miscalculate, we give them ammunition for their defamation claims. And if we do nothing, we're bankrupt in 6 months, Lena countered. I'd rather go down fighting. The press conference was held on a Monday morning, in the same building where Lena had once worked as a junior associate at Morrison & Webb. The irony wasn't lost on her. She stood at a podium with Adrian beside her, facing 24 reporters and 3 television cameras. Behind them, projected on a screen, were the names of the 6 corporations suing them and a summary of what Vieri and Carter had discovered about each one. 6 companies are currently suing our firm for $200 million, Lena began, her voice steady despite the nerves thrumming through her body. They claim we've defamed them, interfered with their business, and caused them emotional distress. What they're really suing us for is being too good at our jobs. She clicked to the next slide, showing Fortress Financial's denial patterns. Fortress Financial denied legitimate insurance claims to grieving families based on fabricated technicalities. We exposed that practice. They're suing us for defamation. Next slide. Novus Systems. Novus Systems knowingly approved defective medical devices for implantation in patients. We provided evidence to federal investigators. They're suing us for tortious interference. She went through each corporation methodically, laying out what they'd done and how Vieri and Carter had exposed it. The reporters were scribbling furiously, cameras rolling, capturing every word. These lawsuits aren't about justice, Lena continued. They're about silencing the people who hold powerful corporations accountable. They're about making it too expensive to investigate fraud, too dangerous to expose corruption, too costly to help people the system has failed. Adrian stepped forward. Vieri and Carter will continue to fight these lawsuits. We will continue to take cases from people who have nowhere else to turn. And we will continue to operate in the spaces where justice actually exists, not in corporate boardrooms or legal technicalities, but in the real world where real people suffer when powerful institutions put profit over humanity. But we can't do it alone, Lena added. We're asking anyone who's been helped by our work, anyone who believes that justice matters more than corporate profits, anyone who's tired of watching the powerful destroy the powerless, we're asking you to stand with us. Donate to our legal defense fund. Share our story. Make it impossible for them to silence us. The questions came fast and furious. How much had they raised for the defense fund? Were they afraid of retaliation? Did they really think they could win against corporations with unlimited resources? Lena answered each one honestly. They hadn't raised anything yet. The fund had just been created. Yes, they were afraid. Fear was rational when you were fighting people willing to commit murder. And no, they didn't know if they could win, but they were going to try because the alternative was unacceptable. The press conference went viral within hours. By evening, the Legal Defense Fund had raised $50,000. By the next morning, it was at $200,000. By the end of the week, they'd raised over $1 million from people who'd been helped by their work, from whistleblowers who understood what they were fighting for, from ordinary people who were tired of watching corruption go unpunished. The money meant they could fight, but it also meant Morrison now knew they wouldn't go quietly. The retaliation was swift and brutal. Someone leaked Lena's sealed personnel file from Morrison and Webb to the press, including fabricated performance reviews that painted her as unstable and incompetent. Someone hacked Sarah's computer and tried to plant evidence of financial fraud. Someone sent threatening letters to Marcus's ex-wife, trying to intimidate him through his family. And someone tried to kill Adrian. He was leaving the office late one night when a car jumped the curb and tried to run him down. Adrian dove behind a parked vehicle, the speeding car missing him by inches before disappearing into traffic. No license plate. No witnesses who could identify the driver. Just another accident in a city full of them. Except it wasn't an accident, and they all knew it. Lena stood in Adrian's apartment that night, watching him ice the shoulder he'd injured diving out of the way, and felt something inside her shift. This wasn't about winning cases anymore. This was about survival. "We need to end this," she said quietly. "I know. I mean, really end it. Not just defend against the lawsuit, but destroy Morrison. Make it impossible for him to come after us or anyone else ever again." Adrian looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "That's a different kind of fight than we've been having. That's not bending the rules. That's breaking them completely." "I know. If we go after Morrison the way you're suggesting, there's no going back. We cross a line that can't be uncrossed." Lena sat down beside him, taking the ice pack from his hand and holding it against his shoulder herself. "He tried to kill you tonight," she said. "He's threatening our team, our clients, everyone we care about. And he's doing it because we had the audacity to fight for justice. So yes, I want to cross that line. I want to break every rule necessary to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. Even if it means becoming what we've been fighting against?" "We're nothing like them," Lena said fiercely. "They destroy people to protect profits. We'd be destroying someone to protect people. That's not the same thing." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her hand. "Okay," he said. "Tell me what you need." What Lena needed was something Morrison had spent years protecting, evidence of his own crimes. She'd suspected from the beginning that Morrison's involvement in the Meridian scandal went deeper than just covering it up. Now she needed to prove it, which meant getting access to files that were protected by attorney-client privilege, encrypted servers, and the kind of security that made breaking in nearly impossible. Nearly, but not entirely. "I can get into Stratton Capital's servers," Sarah said when Lena laid out the plan. "But it's going to be illegal. Not gray area illegal. Straight-up felony computer intrusion illegal." "I know," Lena said, "which is why I'm not asking you to do it. I'm asking if it's possible." "Anything's possible if you're willing to take the risk." "Then I'll take the risk. You just tell me how." Sarah studied her for a long moment. "You're really willing to go to prison for this?" "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stop him from destroying more lives, including mine, if necessary." It took 3 days of preparation. Sarah taught Lena how to navigate the digital intrusion tools, how to cover her tracks, how to extract files without triggering security alerts. Marcus provided physical surveillance, mapping out when Morrison's building had the least security presence. James researched legal defenses they could use if Lena got caught, and Adrian tried one last time to talk her out of it. "Let me do this," he said the night before she planned to break in. "If someone's going to risk prison, it should be me." "You're not expendable," Lena said. "Neither are you." "I'm more expendable than you think.
You built this firm. You created this mission. If something happens to me, you can continue the work. If something happens to you, everything falls apart. That's not true. It is, and you know it. Lena cupped his face in her hands. Besides, I'm better at this than you are. I'm better at seeing patterns, finding evidence, thinking like the people we're fighting. This is what I do, Adrian. Let me do it. He pulled her close, holding her like he could keep her safe through sheer force of will. If anything happens to you, he said against her hair, I will burn Morrison's entire world to the ground. Good, Lena said. But it won't come to that. I'm going to get the evidence, and we're going to destroy him together. She broke into Stratton Capital's servers at 3 a.m. on a Thursday, using a combination of social engineering and digital intrusion that would have impressed her younger self. The files she found were even worse than she'd imagined. Morrison hadn't just known about the Meridian fraud. He'd helped orchestrate it. His private equity firm had been invested in Meridian, and when the fraud was discovered internally, Morrison had used his legal expertise to help cover it up. He'd bribed officials, intimidated whistleblowers, and destroyed evidence. And when Lena had started investigating 3 years ago, he'd made sure she was the one who paid the price. But that wasn't all. The files showed a pattern of similar behavior across dozens of companies. Morrison used Stratton Capital to invest in corporations, then helped them commit fraud to inflate returns. When people tried to expose the fraud, he destroyed them systematically and without mercy. Emily Vasquez's name appeared in the files. So did Thomas Chen's. So did dozens of others Lena had never heard of, people who'd tried to do the right thing and been crushed for it. Lena downloaded everything, her hands shaking with rage and vindication. This was it. This was the evidence that would end him. She was covering her digital tracks when the lights in the office turned on. Richard Morrison stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards. "Hello, Lena," he said with a smile that made her blood run cold. "I've been waiting for you." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd been so careful, so thorough. How had he known? "Surprised?" Morrison asked, stepping into the room. "You shouldn't be. I've been tracking your digital footprint since you started working with Vieri. I knew you'd eventually try something like this. So I let you in. Let you find all those files. Let you think you'd won." "Why?" Lena managed. "Because now I have you on camera committing felony computer intrusion, breaking and entering, corporate espionage. You're going to prison, Lena. And when you do, your little firm falls apart. All those cases you've been building collapse. And I get to continue my work without some self-righteous whistleblower interfering." Lena's mind raced. The files were already uploaded to a secure server. Morrison couldn't delete them now, even if he wanted to. But he was right about the cameras. She'd been caught red-handed committing crimes that would send her to prison for years. Unless she could prove that what she'd found justified the intrusion. "Those files show you've been orchestrating corporate fraud for over a decade," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "That you've had people killed to protect your investments. That you destroyed my career because I got too close to exposing Meridian." "They show allegations and speculation," Morrison corrected. "Nothing that would hold up in court. Certainly nothing that justifies you breaking into my servers. The FBI will investigate. The FBI will investigate you for computer crimes. By the time they get around to looking at my business practices, if they ever do, any evidence you found will be inadmissible because it was obtained illegally. You've destroyed your own case, Lena. That's almost poetic." He gestured to the security guards. "Call the police. I want her arrested immediately." But before they could move, another voice spoke from the doorway. "That won't be necessary." Agent Chen stepped into the office, followed by 3 other FBI agents. Behind them, Adrian appeared, his expression grim but determined. Morrison's smile faltered. "What is this?" "This is a federal raid," Agent Chen said, pulling out a warrant. "We have authorization to seize all computers, servers, and documents related to Stratton Capital's business practices, including the files Ms. Carter just accessed. She broke in here illegally. She was working as a confidential informant for the FBI," Chen said calmly, "under our direction and with appropriate authorization. Everything she accessed is admissible as evidence obtained through a lawful investigation." Lena stared at Adrian, understanding flooding through her. He'd gone to the FBI before she'd broken in, set this up, protected her. Morrison's face went white. "You can't prove anything." We can prove you orchestrated fraud at Meridian Defense, Chen said. We can prove you bribed government officials. We can prove you had Emily Vasquez murdered when she discovered your money laundering operation. And we can prove you've been systematically destroying whistleblowers for over a decade. Your files are very thorough, Mr. Morrison, almost like you wanted to keep a record of your crimes. I want my lawyer. You'll need several, Chen said.
Richard Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of public officials, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 24 other charges. You have the right to remain silent. Lena watched as they led him away in handcuffs. His expensive suit crumpled, his arrogant smile finally gone. It was over. After 3 years of running, hiding, being invisible, it was finally over. Outside in the parking lot, she turned to Adrian. You went to the FBI. You were planning to commit a felony, he said. I couldn't let you do that alone. So you turned me into a confidential informant without telling me? I protected you the only way I knew how. Are you angry? Lena thought about it. She should be angry. He'd made a unilateral decision that affected her life, her freedom, her choices. But looking at his face, seeing the fear and love and desperate need to keep her safe, she couldn't find it in herself to be anything but grateful.
I'm not angry, she said. I'm in love with a man who's just as willing to break the rules for the right reasons as I am.
Adrian pulled her close. The FBI is going to want your testimony. All of it. Everything Morrison did to you. Everyone he hurt. Every case we've built. It's going to be a long process. I have time. And the lawsuit from the 6 corporations, Agent Chen says they're all going to collapse now that Morrison's been arrested. Turns out most of them were financing the litigation. Without him, they can't afford to continue. So we won. We won. Lena leaned into him, feeling the tension of the past 6 months finally release. They'd fought corporations and criminals and the weight of a system designed to protect the powerful. They'd been threatened and attacked and nearly destroyed. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something that mattered. The trial took 8 months. Lena testified for 3 days, laying out everything Morrison had done to her and to countless others. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Morrison was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. By the time the trial ended, Vieri and Carter had grown to a team of 12. They'd moved to a larger office with a view of the bay. They'd won 63 cases and helped hundreds of people find justice when the system had failed them. And they'd built a reputation as the people you called when everyone else said your case was hopeless. Lena stood in the new office on a Saturday morning, alone except for the city spreading out below her. A year ago, she'd been dancing in an empty ballroom, trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. Now she was more alive than she'd ever been. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maria Ruiz. Just wanted to say thank you again. I start my new job on Monday. Carlos would be proud. Another text from Thomas Chen. The safety violations at Novus have been completely overhauled. You saved lives, Lena. Another from Jessica Tran. Emily's parents asked me to tell you they're naming a scholarship in her honor for students who want to study ethics in business. They wanted you to know her death meant something. Lena read each message, feeling the weight and the lightness of what they'd accomplished. They hadn't saved everyone. They hadn't fixed the system. But they'd made a difference for the people who'd had nowhere else to turn. Adrian appeared in the doorway, carrying coffee and pastries from the cafe they'd discovered down the street. You're here early, he said. Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about. Good thoughts or bad thoughts? Both. Lena took the coffee he offered. I was thinking about how, a year ago, I was invisible. I'd convinced myself that safety was worth more than purpose, that hiding was better than fighting. And now? Now I understand that I was never really safe. I was just alone. And there's a difference between being invisible and being unseen. Adrian set down his coffee and crossed to her. You're definitely seen now. By me, by the team, by every person we've helped. By every corporation that's terrified we'll investigate them next. Is that what we are now? The people corporations fear? We're the people who fight when fighting matters. Sometimes that means corporations should fear us. Lena thought about that. They'd built an empire, just like Adrian had promised. Not one of money or traditional power, but of justice carved out in the gray spaces where the law failed. They'd helped people the system couldn't or wouldn't protect. They'd shown that sometimes the rules needed to be bent to make things right. And in the process, she'd found herself again. Not the woman who'd hidden for 3 years, or the lawyer who'd believed playing by the rules would keep her safe, but someone new, someone forged in the fire of fighting for what mattered. "I have a proposal," she said. "Another one?" "We should get married." Adrian blinked, clearly not expecting that. "Is this because we work well together, or because you love me?" "Both. Because I love you, and because what we've built is too important to leave to chance. If something happens to one of us, I want the other to have legal standing to continue the work. I want us to be official partners in every sense. That's the most pragmatic marriage proposal I've ever heard. Would you prefer something romantic?" "I'd prefer honesty," and that was honest. Adrian pulled her close. "Yes. Let's get married. Let's formalize this partnership in every possible way. Let's build this empire together for as long as we can." They were married 3 weeks later, in a small ceremony attended by their team and the clients whose lives they'd changed. Maria Ruiz cried through the whole thing. Thomas Chen gave a toast about courage and justice. The Vasquez family brought flowers for Emily, who couldn't be there but whose sacrifice had brought them all together. It wasn't a traditional wedding, but then nothing about their lives was traditional anymore. 2 years later, Vieri and Carter had expanded to 3 offices across California. They'd helped over 1,000 people find justice. They'd brought down corrupt corporations, exposed fraud, protected whistleblowers, and proved that sometimes fighting dirty for the right reasons was the most honest work you could do. Lena stood in the San Francisco office on a Friday evening, reviewing case files while Adrian finished a call with a potential client. Their team had grown to 25 people, each one someone who'd been burned by the system and had chosen to fight back rather than hide. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. "Ms. Carter? My name is Jennifer Wu. I work for Cascade Pharmaceuticals. I've discovered that my company has been falsifying clinical trial data for a cancer drug. People are dying because of it. Everyone I've tried to report it to has told me to stay quiet. I don't know where else to turn." Lena listened to the fear and desperation in the woman's voice. She thought about all the other people who'd made similar calls over the past 2 years. People who'd been told their suffering didn't matter, that corporate profits were more important than human lives, that fighting back was futile. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, dancing alone in a ballroom, trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. And she smiled. "Jennifer," she said, "you called the right place. Tell me everything." Because that was who Lena Carter was now. Not invisible, not hiding, not safe. She was someone who fought, someone who stood in the fire and chose to act, someone who'd built an empire in the shadows where justice actually lived. Adrian finished his call and came to stand beside her, slipping his hand into hers as she scribbled notes from Jennifer Wu's story. "Another case?" he asked. "Another fight," Lena corrected. "Another chance to prove that sometimes the good guys actually win. We don't always win. No, but we always fight, and that matters." Outside the windows, the city lights spread across the bay like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere out there were people suffering injustices that would never make the news. People being crushed by systems designed to protect the powerful. People who needed someone willing to operate in the gray spaces where justice actually existed. And Lena Carter, former lawyer, former maid, current builder of empires, was ready to fight for every single one of them. She wasn't the woman who'd disappeared 3 years ago. She wasn't the woman who'd accepted invisibility as the price of safety. She was powerful, dangerous, and exactly where she belonged. And this fight for justice in a world that tried to crush anyone who dared to demand it, this was just the beginning. Because empires built on justice don't crumble. They grow. They spread. They inspire others to stop hiding and start fighting. And Lena Carter had no intention of stopping anytime soon. She had work to do, people to help, battles to win. And she was going to face every single one of them standing in the light, with Adrian beside her and a team of fighters at her back. Not invisible anymore. Never invisible again. Just exactly who she was meant to be.